Rush. The rush is one of the most insidious manipulation tactics because it preys on your instinct to act before you think. It's the deliberate creation of urgency, an artificial storm designed to drown out your logic and hijack your decision-making. Manipulators use time as a weapon, compressing your mental space until panic replaces clarity. When someone tells you there's no time to waste, what they often mean is, don't stop to think. This tactic thrives on adrenaline. Under pressure, your brain shifts from analysis to survival mode, favoring quick choices over smart ones. That's when people sign contracts they haven't read, agree to deals they don't understand, or say yes just to make the discomfort stop. Urgency makes even intelligent minds stumble because it taps into a primal fear, the fear of missing out, of being left behind, of losing an opportunity that may never come again. You'll recognize the rush when someone floods you with intensity, fast speech, insistent tone, constant reminders that others are waiting or the window is closing. They'll build the illusion that you must act now, making pause feel like betrayal or weakness. But the truth is simple. If a decision can't survive a moment of silence, it's not a decision worth making. The manipulator doesn't want you to think. They want you to react. The faster you move, the less you notice the strings being pulled. The rush isn't about speed. It's about control. And by the time you realize it, you've already signed away your power. Vague promise. The vague promise is a masterstroke of manipulation, wrapped in the soft glow of hope. It whispers just enough to ignite your imagination, but never enough to hold the speaker accountable. It's the something amazing is coming, the we'll take care of you, the trust me, it'll be worth it. Behind the fog of uncertainty, the manipulator hides the truth. There is no clear plan, only your desire to believe. This tactic works because the human mind fills in blanks with what it wants to hear. A vague promise gives you the illusion of direction while keeping control entirely in the other person's hands. They let your imagination do the heavy lifting, turning their emptiness into your dream. It's the emotional equivalent of a mirage. You chase what looks like salvation, but it disappears the moment you reach for it. Manipulators use vague promises to string people along. Employees waiting for a promotion soon, lovers told to just be patient, followers convinced that great changes are on the horizon. They know specifics create expectations, and expectations can be measured. Ambiguity, however, is untouchable. You can't accuse someone of breaking a promise they never truly made. What makes the vague promise dangerous is not its deception, but its seduction. It feeds on hope, and hope blinds. The more you invest in the illusion, the harder it becomes to admit there's nothing real behind it. The manipulator never needs to deliver. They only need to keep you waiting, suspended between trust and doubt, forever chasing a promise that was never meant to come true. Trust me. Trust me is the manipulator's shortcut to control, the phrase that demands faith before proof. It bypasses logic, reason, and evidence, appealing directly to emotion. When someone says trust me at the moment you start asking questions, what they're really saying is stop thinking. It's a command disguised as comfort, a velvet chain that binds your intuition before it can warn you. This phrase works because it sounds intimate. It suggests closeness, loyalty, and understanding. But in manipulation, it's used not to deepen connection, but to weaponize it. The manipulator leans on your humanity, your wish to believe in people, your fear of seeming cold or suspicious, and uses it to lower your defenses. Trust me appears in moments of high emotion. When truth would take too long and doubt feels cruel, it arrives with warmth in the voice, steady eyes, and the illusion of sincerity. The danger lies in how it silences your inner alarm. You want to believe that the person standing before you means well. You want their confidence to mean something real, so you quiet the unease, ignore the missing details, and surrender your discernment in the name of harmony. That's exactly when the trap closes. Manipulators know that trust isn't something earned. it's something they can provoke. Trust me is the emotional switch that flips reason to obedience. Once that phrase lands and your questions fade, they no longer need to prove anything. You've already given them permission to deceive you. Excessive flattery. Excessive flattery is manipulation wrapped in sweetness, a calculated overdose of praise meant to cloud judgment and weaken resistance. It feels intoxicating at first, like sunlight after a storm. Someone finally sees you, celebrates you, tells you everything you've secretly hoped to hear. But beneath the warmth lies intent. The manipulator flatters not to uplift you, but to own you. They study you closely, the words that make you light up, the insecurities you hide, and then feed them back to you with precision. You're the only one I can trust. No one does it like you. You're brilliant, honestly. People don't appreciate you enough. Each compliment is a thread, woven into a web where you start to crave their validation. What began as kindness turns into control because soon you're doing things just to keep that golden light shining on you. Flattery disarms the skeptical mind. It lowers defenses faster than threats ever could. When someone showers you with admiration, your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, the same chemicals that bond you to lovers and friends. You feel safe. You feel valued. That's when you stop asking why they're being so generous or what they might want in return. The manipulator knows that genuine respect takes time to build, but flattery buys trust instantly. Once you're hooked, they can ask for favors, shift boundaries, or blur ethics, all under the halo of your own ego. Excessive flattery isn't about seeing your worth. It's about making you see them as the mirror that defines it. Sudden deadline. The sudden deadline is pressure disguised as urgency, a psychological chokehold meant to force your compliance before your logic can breathe. It arrives out of nowhere, an unexpected expiration date, a limited time offer, a deal that ends tonight. The manipulator knows that time limits trigger panic, and panic silences reason. They don't need to convince you with facts. They just need to convince you that you'll lose something if you hesitate. This trick preys on the fear of missing out, the primal terror of watching an opportunity slip away. When that fear floods the mind, the body reacts like it's in danger. Your pulse quickens, your focus narrows, and your ability to think critically evaporates. That's when you're most pliable. You stop questioning the offer, the terms, or the person. You just want the anxiety to end, so you comply. Manipulators use sudden deadlines to bypass scrutiny. They corner you with phrases like, "This chance won't come again," "We need your answer now," or "The others already agreed." The goal is never speed, it's surrender. The more you rush, the less you see. And when the clock runs out, they smile, because whether or not you made the right choice no longer matters. You made it, and that's enough for them. The sudden deadline isn't about creating urgency. It's about manufacturing desperation. It's not a race against time. It's a race against your own clarity, and you're not supposed to win. Secret requests. Secret requests are the manipulator's quiet poison, spoken softly, framed as trust, and sealed with the weight of confidentiality. They begin with words that feel flattering. "I'm only telling you because I trust you," or "Keep this between us." In that moment, you're not just being asked to do something. You're being invited into an illusion of intimacy, a secret alliance that feels special, private, and powerful. But what you don't see is the invisible chain being fastened around your neck. A secret request is never about trust. It's about leverage. The manipulator counts on your need to feel chosen, to feel loyal. By keeping their secret, you become complicit. You carry their burden, not realizing that silence is the currency they use to buy your obedience. Every time you honor the secrecy, you prove your loyalty and lose a piece of your freedom. It often starts small, hiding a detail, bending a rule, covering a conversation. But secrets rot from the inside. What begins as one quiet favor turns into a pattern of concealment. Soon, the manipulator doesn't even need to ask. They simply remind you what you already agreed to hide. Secret requests create isolation. You can't seek advice or clarity without breaking trust. You become trapped between guilt and duty, believing you're protecting someone when, in truth, they're using you as a shield. The more secrets you keep, the more power they have. In manipulation, silence isn't golden. It's the lock on the cage they built around you. Guilt trips. Guilt trips are emotional chains forged in silence and obligation. They twist your empathy into a weapon, turning kindness into compliance. A manipulator doesn't need to shout or demand. They just sigh, withdraw, or look disappointed until you feel like the villain in a story you didn't write. Their power lies in making you feel responsible for their emotions, as if your boundaries were acts of cruelty and your needs were sins. It starts subtly. After everything I've done for you, they might say, or worse, say nothing at all, letting the silence scream louder than words. You replay every memory, searching for the wrong you supposedly committed. That's how guilt works. It doesn't accuse you outright, it makes you accuse yourself. The manipulator simply watches as you bend to relieve the discomfort, offering what they wanted all along: your compliance, your apology, your surrender. This tactic thrives on compassion. It targets good people, the ones who care deeply, who hate causing pain. The manipulator senses that softness and molds it into control. They make their suffering your debt, their disappointment your duty to fix. Over time, you begin to mistake servitude for love and exhaustion for kindness. The cruelest part of a guilt trip is how invisible it feels. There's no raised voice, no threat, just the aching weight of "you should have known better." And when you finally give in, the guilt doesn't fade, it grows. Because deep down, you know you didn't act freely. You acted to escape the unbearable feeling of not being enough for someone who never intended to let you be. Changing history. Changing history is one of the most psychologically devastating manipulation tactics because it doesn't just distort facts, it rewrites your memory. It begins subtly, with harmless corrections. That's not how it happened. You're remembering wrong. But over time, those corrections evolve into revisions, and those revisions become the new reality. The manipulator reshapes the past until you no longer trust your own mind. This trick feeds on confusion. When someone you care about insists that events unfolded differently, that they never said that cruel thing, never broke that promise, never caused that harm, you hesitate. Doubt slips in. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you overreacted. And in that hesitation, they gain control. By altering your sense of what's true, they anchor your emotions to a version of the past that benefits them. Changing history allows manipulators to erase accountability. They turn apologies into accusations and victims into villains. They'll rewrite shared moments, removing their cruelty and inserting your fault. Soon, you start to question everything: your memory, your judgment, even your sanity. That's the point. If you can't rely on what you remember, you'll rely on them instead. The most chilling part is how seamlessly it works. With enough repetition and conviction, the mind begins to conform. Reality bends under emotional pressure. You start defending the person who's rewriting your story just to restore peace. Changing history is not just deceit, it's psychological colonization. It invades your memory, your truth, your identity, until you're living in a version of reality they invented, and you no longer remember what was real to begin with. Public pressure. Public pressure is manipulation weaponized through the crowd. It's the art of turning eyes into shackles, forcing you to comply not because you agree, but because everyone's watching. The manipulator drags your private hesitation into a public arena where silence looks like guilt and resistance looks like defiance. In that moment, the truth no longer matters. Perception does. This tactic thrives on the human instinct to belong. We are social creatures wired to seek approval and avoid rejection. When the manipulator puts you under a spotlight, surrounded by colleagues, family, or peers, They know your fear of embarrassment will outweigh your desire for honesty. You'll nod, smile, agree, anything to avoid being the one who makes things awkward. They don't need your belief. They need your obedience in front of witnesses. The cruelty of public pressure lies in its invisibility. You might not even realize you've been cornered until after the moment passes, after you've said yes, signed something, or stayed silent when you should have spoken. The crowd becomes a weapon, and every gaze feels like judgment. Manipulators use this to rewrite dynamics. They praise you loudly, so refusal feels ungrateful. They question you publicly, so defense feels aggressive. They turn the group into their accomplice, making your compliance look voluntary. And when it's over, you're left smiling on the outside, seething on the inside, wondering how you were pushed into submission by nothing more than an audience and the unbearable weight of being seen. No paperwork. No paperwork is the manipulator's favorite phrase when they want to move in the shadows. It's the soft-spoken invitation to step outside the safety of proof, the quiet erasure of evidence disguised as convenience. They'll say it with charm. Let's just keep it simple. We don't need all that red tape. I trust you, you trust me. It sounds efficient, even flattering. But what they're really saying is, let's make sure you have nothing to protect you when this goes wrong. Paperwork isn't just bureaucracy, it's memory. It's the cold, clear trail that holds truth when words twist and stories shift. A manipulator knows that once there's no signature, no message, no record, there's no accountability. Promises become smoke, deals become deniable. When you realize the trap, it's too late because you can't prove what was said, agreed, or taken. They create a false sense of intimacy to replace structure. You're not like the others, they'll say. I know I can trust you. That warmth isn't respect, it's bait. It makes you feel chosen, cooperative, part of something secret and special. But every handshake without a contract, every agreement just between us, is a silent surrender of power. The no paperwork tactic thrives in the gray areas where emotion blurs logic. It's the enemy of clarity, the killer of truth. By removing the record, the manipulator removes your voice, and once that paper is gone, so is your protection. Fear over facts. Fear over facts is the manipulator's oldest trick, a shadow they cast to make you forget the light. It works by flooding your emotions until reason drowns. When fear takes hold, the brain stops analyzing and starts surviving. Logic shuts down, adrenaline takes over, and suddenly the impossible sounds inevitable. The manipulator knows this. They don't need truth on their side, only terror vivid enough to eclipse it. They'll whisper threats dressed as warnings. If you don't act now, you'll lose everything. People like you don't last long if they question things. You have no idea what could happen. Each phrase bypasses critical thought and strikes at your most primitive instinct to stay safe. Fear becomes the fog that hides their motives, turning your caution into their control. In conversations driven by fear, facts become irrelevant. You could show proof, evidence, reason, and it wouldn't matter. Once panic takes root, the mind searches not for truth, but for escape. Manipulators exploit this by creating crises that only they can solve. They present themselves as the protector against the very danger they invented. The genius of this tactic is its invisibility. You rarely notice when fear replaces fact. You just feel the urgency, the dread, the sense that you must obey. Over time, this conditioning teaches you to mistake anxiety for intuition and obedience for safety. By the time you realize the danger was never real, the damage already is. Because when fear rules, facts no longer matter, and that's exactly how the manipulator wins. Authority without proof. Authority without proof is manipulation dressed in confidence, a performance of certainty meant to silence doubt before it's even spoken. The manipulator projects expertise, power, or moral superiority with such conviction that questioning them feels almost blasphemous. They don't earn authority, they declare it. And the more forcefully they assert it, the more people accept it as truth. This tactic thrives in the spaces where fear and confusion meet. When someone sounds sure, uses jargon, drops names, or speaks in absolutes, the human brain relaxes. We're wired to follow the voice that seems to know where it's going. It's a survival instinct. When chaos strikes, we look for a leader. Manipulators exploit that instinct. They step into uncertainty and fill it with their self-appointed dominance. You'll hear them say things like, "I've been doing this for years," or "I know what's best." But when you ask for evidence, the tone shifts. Suddenly, your curiosity becomes disrespect. You're told to just trust the process, don't overthink it, or stop questioning authority. They trade substance for swagger, and in that exchange, your critical thinking quietly disappears. Authority without proof works because it feels safe to obey confidence and dangerous to challenge it. The manipulator knows that most people would rather comply than confront, and once you submit to the illusion of their power, they no longer need to justify anything. Their word becomes fact, their confidence becomes law, and your silence becomes permission for the lie to rule. Interrupted questions. Interrupted questions are one of the subtlest forms of control, designed not to answer you, but to erase your right to ask. The manipulator uses constant interruptions to fracture your thoughts, derail your confidence, and make you doubt the validity of your own curiosity. Every time you try to reach the truth, they slice through your words with charm, outrage, or sudden diversion. You never finish the question, and that's the point. This tactic thrives in chaos. By cutting you off, they steal your rhythm and leave your mind scrambling to recover. It creates confusion, and confusion breeds compliance. You start second-guessing yourself. Was my question too harsh? Did I overstep? The manipulator counts on that self-doubt. The less certain you are of your own voice, the more control they have over the conversation. Interrupted questions also send a deeper message. Your curiosity is inconvenient. They train you to stop probing, to shrink your words, to stay quiet, to keep the peace. They might laugh it off. "Sorry, I just got excited," or bulldoze right over your sentence with emotional theatrics, making your interruption seem trivial compared to their reaction. Either way, the result is silence. Over time, the damage compounds. You learn that asking for clarity leads to conflict, that speaking up invites dismissal. The manipulator no longer needs to interrupt you. You start interrupting yourself, and that's when they've won. Not because they silenced your voice, but because they taught you to do it for them. Escalating small asks. Escalating small asks is the manipulator's art of slow invasion, the methodical tightening of a leash you didn't know was there. It begins with something harmless, almost flattering, a tiny favor, a quick task, a small compromise. "Could you help me just this once? Would you mind covering for me?" It feels kind, human, even generous to agree. And because it costs so little, you say yes. That first yes is the key that opens the door. Once they know you'll comply, the requests grow, but never fast enough to alarm you. Each ask builds on the last, inching forward until your boundaries have shifted entirely. You start by lending an hour. Soon you're giving days. You start by agreeing to one exception. Soon you're breaking your own rules. The manipulator counts on your consistency bias, the human need to appear reliable, to justify past choices by continuing them. To say no later would feel like betrayal, not to them, but to yourself. This is how people get trapped in obligations they never consciously accepted. By the time you notice the pattern, you're tangled in invisible debt. The manipulator doesn't thank you for your help. They remind you of it. After everything I've asked, you're really saying no now? And guilt does the rest. Escalating small asks is a quiet conquest. It doesn't steal your power. It convinces you to give it away, one favor at a time, until the person you were at the start wouldn't even recognize the one saying yes at the end. Everyone claims. Everyone claims are the manipulator's shield of false consensus, a way to make you doubt your judgment by summoning an invisible crowd against you. It sounds harmless at first. Everyone agrees. Nobody else had a problem. People are saying, but beneath those vague words lies a calculated attack on your confidence. The manipulator knows that humans fear isolation more than being wrong, so they weaponize belonging itself. When someone insists that everyone believes something, they aren't informing you. They're cornering you. They're telling you that if you resist, you'll be the odd one out, the difficult one, the fool who can't see what's obvious to the world. This triggers a deep social instinct, the need to conform. Your mind starts scanning for proof that maybe they're right, that maybe you are overreacting. The more you search, the smaller your certainty feels. This tactic thrives on vagueness. Everyone is never named, never quoted, never real. It's an illusion of numbers, a ghost army marching behind the manipulator's words. And yet, it works because social pressure doesn't need evidence, only suggestion. The moment you picture others watching, judging, or agreeing, you begin to fold under the weight of imaginary eyes. In truth, everyone is usually no one at all. It's a spell cast to make you trade your intuition for acceptance. The manipulator doesn't want you to think. They want you to surrender to the comfort of the majority. And when you finally silence your instincts to fit in, you'll realize that everyone was just one voice, echoing inside your fear of standing alone. Contradictions. Contradictions are the manipulator's smoke and mirrors, a deliberate distortion of logic that keeps you off balance, doubting your own sense of consistency. One day, they're warm, understanding, and full of promises. The next, cold, dismissive, and cruel. They'll praise you for a trait today and condemn you for it tomorrow. It's not confusion by accident, it's confusion by design. Contradictions fracture your emotional stability until you cling to their approval just to regain equilibrium. This tactic weaponizes uncertainty. When the rules keep changing, you stop trying to win. You just try not to lose. The manipulator thrives in that exhaustion because a disoriented mind is easier to control. They'll shift their stories, deny what they said, and flip their values in the same breath, leaving you scrambling to make sense of the chaos. You start to think the problem must be you, because how could anyone else be so inconsistent and still sound so sure? Contradictions also serve as bait. They test how much you're willing to tolerate, how far your boundaries will bend before they break. Each inconsistency you excuse becomes permission for the next. Before long, you're apologizing for being confused, begging for clarity from the very person who's creating the fog. The true danger of contradictions lies in their erosion of truth. When reality shifts daily, your instincts dull. You stop trusting patterns, stop believing yourself, and start relying on them to define what's real. That's when they have you, not by force, but by disorientation. Isolation attempts. Isolation attempts are the manipulator's way of cutting the strings that connect you to reality. It starts subtly, small comments about who you can trust, who doesn't understand you, who talks behind your back. At first, it feels like concern, even protection, but over time, the walls close in. The world shrinks until only one voice remains, theirs. This tactic thrives on dependency. By isolating you from friends, family, or colleagues, the manipulator becomes your only source of validation, comfort, and truth. They chip away at your support system one conversation at a time, painting everyone else as jealous, toxic, or unreliable. They want you to doubt your allies and rely solely on them for guidance. Once that dependency takes root, they no longer need to convince you. You'll defend them, even against your own instincts. Isolation doesn't always happen through physical separation. Sometimes it's emotional, subtle disapproval when you spend time with others, silent treatment after you set boundaries, guilt when you prioritize yourself. They rewrite your social world until connection feels like betrayal. The manipulator thrives in that loneliness because isolation breeds control. The most dangerous part is how gentle it can seem. They'll say they just care, that they only want what's best for you. But care that isolates is not love, it's possession. Once you're cut off from other perspectives, your mind becomes an echo chamber for their words. And in that silence, the manipulator doesn't need chains. They already own your world. Emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail is the manipulator's invisible weapon, a trap woven from guilt, fear, and love. It doesn't demand your obedience outright. It makes you feel like refusing would destroy something sacred. If you really cared, you'd do this for me. After all I've done for you, you'll regret it if you walk away. Every phrase is a chain made of emotion, tightening around your conscience until you mistake control for compassion. The power of emotional blackmail lies in its intimacy. It only works because you care. The manipulator studies your heart, your need to be seen as kind, loyal, good, and twists it until love becomes obligation. They cry to keep you from leaving, sulk to make you feel cruel, or threaten to fall apart without your help. They know you'll stay, not because you want to, but because guilt will eat you alive if you don't. This form of manipulation rewrites your moral compass. You begin to believe that protecting their feelings is more important than protecting your boundaries. They turn your empathy into a leash, making you responsible for their emotions while they remain untouched by yours. It's not loud or violent. It's quiet and suffocating. You start walking on eggshells, fearing their reactions more than your own truth. The cruelest part? They make you believe that letting go would make you the villain. Emotional blackmail doesn't take your freedom by force. It convinces you to surrender it out of love. Rewritten deals. Rewritten deals are betrayal disguised as revision, the quiet reshaping of an agreement after trust has been secured. It's when the manipulator nods along to your terms, smiles at your relief, and then, once you've relaxed, begins to shift the foundation beneath you. They change a word here, a condition there, until the deal you agreed to no longer exists. What was once mutual becomes theirs alone, and you're left wondering when everything started to feel wrong. This tactic preys on faith in good faith. Most people assume that once something is agreed upon, it's safe, that words, promises, or contracts will hold their shape. The manipulator counts on that assumption. They wait until you're emotionally or financially invested, then alter the rules while insisting it's just a clarification. They'll rewrite your expectations with calm confidence, as if the change were obvious all along. Rewritten deals don't always happen on paper. They happen in relationships, workplaces, friendships, anywhere trust creates blind spots. I never said that. You must have misunderstood. This is what we meant. The gaslighting comes wrapped in reason, making you question your own memory instead of their deceit. And the moment you hesitate to confront it, the new version becomes the official one. What makes this manipulation so cruel is how it corrodes reality itself. You find yourself defending an agreement that no longer exists, fighting for fairness in a game where the rules keep changing. By the time you realize what happened, the ink is dry, your name is on it, and the truth you thought you shared has been quietly rewritten into a lie that serves only them. Fake scarcity. Fake scarcity is the manipulator's illusion of urgency, a fabricated sense of rarity designed to make you act without thinking. It preys on one of the oldest instincts in human psychology, the fear of missing out. When someone says, "Only a few left," or "This offer won't last," they're not offering opportunity. They're manufacturing panic. It's not about value, it's about pressure. The manipulator knows that scarcity flips a switch deep in the brain. When something seems limited, we assign it more worth. Our logical reasoning collapses under the weight of imagined loss. Suddenly, hesitation feels dangerous, and saying no feels like closing the door on destiny. They count on that pulse of anxiety, the one that makes you grab before you've even looked closely at what you're holding. you'll see fake scarcity everywhere, in marketing pitches, in relationships, in power dynamics. A boss implying that many would kill for your position. A partner suggesting, you'll never find someone like me again. A salesperson claiming, this deal ends tonight. These phrases create pressure, not truth. They corner you into surrendering choice for speed. What makes fake scarcity so effective is how personal it feels. It doesn't just threaten to take away a thing, it threatens to take away your chance. And in that tension, people do things they never would in calm daylight. The manipulator doesn't need to steal from you directly. They just make you believe you'll lose something if you don't obey now. By the time the fear fades, you've already handed them what they wanted, willingly. Dodge specifics. Specifics are the manipulator's favorite escape route, slipping through questions like smoke, leaving you grasping for answers that never come. When pressed for clarity, they respond with vague assurances, emotional distractions, or a flood of irrelevant details. You ask for facts, they give you feelings. You ask for numbers, they give you stories. The goal isn't to explain, it's to exhaust. This tactic thrives on confusion. Specifics create accountability, and accountability is the manipulator's enemy. By staying vague, they remain untouchable. You can't hold them to promises they never clearly made or challenge a statement that was never truly defined. They build their power in the gray zone, where words mean everything and nothing at once. You'll notice it when every question is met with phrases like, "Don't worry about that," "We'll handle it later," or "You'll see soon enough." They cloak their avoidance in confidence, making you feel naive for even asking. The more they dodge, the more self-conscious you become, until your curiosity feels like an inconvenience. That's when they've won, when you stop demanding answers and start accepting ambiguity as normal. Dodged specifics turn dialogue into fog. You walk away thinking you understand, only to realize later that nothing concrete was ever said. It's not miscommunication, it's strategy. Because as long as you're lost in the haze of half-truths, they can rewrite reality whenever they choose. The manipulator's greatest trick isn't lying outright. It's never saying enough to be caught. Charm to cold. Charm to cold is one of the most psychologically destabilizing manipulation tactics, a calculated swing between warmth and withdrawal designed to keep you addicted to approval. It begins with charm, dazzling attention, laughter that feels genuine, eyes that make you feel seen. They pull you in with charisma so magnetic it feels like destiny. You feel chosen, understood, special. That's when the trap begins to form. Just as you start to relax into that warmth, it vanishes. The smile fades, the tone sharpens, the messages stop. You're left staring into silence, replaying every word, wondering what you did wrong. The shift feels sudden, but is deliberate. The manipulator controls the temperature of the relationship like a dial, turning affection into ice to remind you that comfort comes only from their approval. It's not affection they're offering, it's conditioning. This emotional whiplash creates dependency. Your nervous system becomes hooked on the cycle of reward and withdrawal, chasing their charm like a drug. Each cold spell makes the next bit of kindness feel euphoric, convincing you to stay just to feel that warmth again. The uncertainty rewires your sense of worth. You stop asking, "Is this healthy?" and start asking, "How can I get them to like me again?" Charm to cold manipulation doesn't break you all at once. It erodes you slowly, teaching you that love must be earned through pain. The more you chase their approval, the colder they become. And just when you're ready to walk away, they smile again, and you melt, forgetting that the chill was never accidental. Loyalty leverage. Loyalty leverage is manipulation dressed as devotion, the art of turning your integrity into a leash. It starts with warmth, with belonging, with the intoxicating feeling of being part of something or someone that needs you. You're my most trusted. You've always been loyal. Don't let me down now. The manipulator weaves loyalty into guilt. binding your identity to their approval until saying no feels like betrayal. They study what loyalty means to you, your pride in keeping promises, your fear of letting others down, and then twist it into a tool. They frame every request as a test of faith. The more unreasonable the demand, the more sacred they make it sound. If you really cared, you'd do this for me. After all we've been through, I thought I could count on you. Each line drips with disappointment, forcing you to prove your loyalty over and over until it no longer belongs to you. This tactic thrives in hierarchies, families, teams, movements, relationships, anywhere loyalty is glorified. The manipulator turns moral strength into emotional weakness, convincing you that obedience equals honor. And when you finally hesitate, when you start to question, they brand you as ungrateful, disloyal, or cold. The cruelty of loyalty leverage is that it exploits the best parts of you, the parts that love deeply and stand by others. It turns virtue into vulnerability. You give more, trying to show you care, unaware that every sacrifice tightens their grip. Because to a manipulator, loyalty isn't earned, it's extracted. And by the time you realize it, your devotion has become their weapon. Hostile when questioned. Hostile when questioned is the manipulator's shield of aggression, their way of turning curiosity into conflict. The moment you start to probe, to ask why, to seek clarity, the air changes, their tone sharpens, their face hardens, and suddenly you're no longer having a conversation, you're on trial. The manipulator's anger isn't spontaneous, it's strategic. It's designed to make you regret ever doubting them. This tactic thrives on emotional intimidation. They don't need to provide proof or logic if they can make you too scared to ask again. A raised voice, a glare, a sudden withdrawal. Each reaction teaches you that questions are dangerous. Soon, silence feels safer than truth. That's the moment they win, because once you stop challenging them, they no longer need to lie. They can say anything, and it becomes fact by default. What's truly sinister is how this hostility is often disguised as hurt. They might say, "I can't believe you don't trust me," or "You always assume the worst of me." The guilt lands heavier than the anger. You find yourself apologizing, soothing them, when all you did was ask for honesty. Over time, the fear of setting them off rewires you. You start editing yourself, softening your tone, avoiding confrontation altogether. Hostility, when questioned, isn't about emotion, it's about control. The manipulator's rage is a performance, rehearsed to condition obedience. And once you've learned to stay quiet to keep the peace, they no longer need to silence you. You do it for them. Shaming. Shaming is the manipulator's scalpel, sharp, quiet, and precise. It's not about open cruelty, it's about cutting you where it hurts most and calling it help. They dress their insults as guidance, their humiliation as honesty. "I'm just being real with you. I thought you could handle the truth." But beneath that mask of care is one purpose: to make you feel small enough to obey. Shame is one of the most powerful human emotions. It burrows deep, convincing you that you are not just wrong, but bad. Manipulators understand this instinctively. They don't argue facts, they target your identity. Instead of saying you made a mistake, they imply you are the mistake. They chip away at your confidence until guilt becomes your default state, and then they position themselves as the only one who can restore your worth. Shaming can sound like mockery, disappointment, or subtle disapproval. Sometimes it's public, a jab meant to humiliate you in front of others. Other times it's private, a sigh, a look, a word that lingers like a bruise. The manipulator frames your pain as overreaction, teaching you to silence your feelings for fear of looking weak. What makes this tactic devastating is how it rewires the heart. You begin to police yourself, preemptively shrinking, apologizing, and pleasing to avoid the sting of shame. That's the moment they stop needing to shame you. You start doing it on their behalf. Because shame isn't just control through fear, it's control through self-erasure. And once you've internalized it, you carry the cage inside you. Fact monopolies. Fact monopolies are the manipulator's fortress of control, the power to decide what is known, what is hidden, and what is true. It's not just about lying, it's about owning information so completely that no one else can challenge their version of reality. They hoard details, twist data, and release only what benefits them, creating a world where every fact must pass through their filter before it reaches you. At first, it looks like confidence, someone who just knows more. They speak with authority, drown others in jargon, and subtly mock questions as naive. Soon, people stop asking. The manipulator becomes the sole interpreter of truth, the gatekeeper of knowledge. Once they control the narrative, they control perception, and perception is power. Fact, monopolies thrive in workplaces, relationships, and governments alike. The manipulator withholds key details, shares half-truths, or fabricates context to keep others dependent. You wouldn't understand. It's complicated. Just trust me, I've checked. Each phrase builds a wall between you and clarity. You're left uncertain, relying on them for answers that never quite add up. The danger lies in how subtly it erodes confidence. When one person controls all information, doubt starts to feel irrational. You stop trusting your instincts, your memory, even your logic. And that's the goal, to make you question everything except them. A fact monopoly isn't about knowledge, it's about control through confusion. Once they become the only source of truth, they don't need to convince you anymore. They just need you to stop looking anywhere else. Anecdotes over data. Anecdotes over data is the manipulator's favorite sleight of hand, using stories to drown out statistics, emotion to eclipse evidence. It's the art of making one vivid tale feel truer than 1,000 facts. I knew someone who tried that and lost everything. My friend's cousin said it ruined their life. With every story, they pull you deeper into feeling and further from thinking. The truth no longer matters, only how it feels does. Humans are wired for stories. We remember emotion long after we forget logic. Manipulators know this and exploit it mercilessly. Instead of confronting numbers that can be verified, they craft narratives that can't be questioned because they're personal. You can't argue with someone's experience, even if it's cherry-picked, distorted, or entirely fabricated. And once that story takes root, no amount of data can compete with the image it paints in your mind. This tactic thrives in fear-driven conversations. It turns one exception into a rule, one coincidence into a warning. Facts require patience. Anecdotes deliver impact. They bypass analysis and go straight for your gut, making you believe danger is everywhere, that risk is certain, that emotion is proof. The manipulator uses this emotional contagion to steer your choices, to make you feel rather than think. The most dangerous part is how convincing it feels. When someone shares a story drenched in fear or heartbreak, your empathy opens the door and your reason quietly steps aside. You start to see their story as the truth. And once that happens, the manipulator doesn't need evidence because they've already rewritten your reality with a single, unforgettable lie. Gaslighting memory. Gaslighting memory is one of the most brutal manipulations because it doesn't just distort what happened, it attacks your sense of reality itself. It begins quietly, with small denials. You're remembering wrong. That never happened. You're overreacting. Each dismissal chips away at your certainty until you start second-guessing even the clearest moments of your own life. The manipulator's goal is simple. If they can make you doubt your memory, they can make you doubt yourself. This tactic turns your mind into a battlefield. The manipulator rewrites events, denies words you clearly heard, and reframes situations to make you look unstable or overly sensitive. When you confront them with facts, they twist them calmly, confidently, until you feel foolish for even trying. They may even recruit others to reinforce their version, surrounding you with false witnesses until isolation feels like the only way to stay sane. Gaslighting memory is a slow unraveling. At first, you argue back. You defend your recollection, certain of what's true, but after enough corrections, mockery, or anger, fatigue sets in. You stop fighting, not because you believe them, but because you no longer believe yourself. You start apologizing for things you never did, accepting blame for moments you didn't cause, living under a reality that isn't yours. What makes this tactic so devastating is its invisibility. There are no raised voices, no visible bruises, just a steady erosion of confidence. Gaslighting memory isn't about winning an argument. It's about breaking your anchor to truth until the only version of reality you recognize is the one they feed you. Midstream changes. Midstream changes are the manipulator's sleight of hand, altering the rules halfway through the game and pretending they've been that way all along. It begins innocently, almost imperceptibly. A revised term here, a shifted promise there, a new understanding slipped quietly into the conversation. By the time you realize what's happened, the ground beneath you has already moved. This tactic feeds on momentum. Once you've invested time, effort, or emotion into something, your natural instinct is to continue rather than confront. The manipulator knows this. They exploit your commitment, rewriting agreements while you're too deep to back out. It's not about deception in the beginning. It's about control in the middle. They count on your politeness, your fatigue, your desire to just get it done. Midstream changes often arrive cloaked in logic. We just need to adjust a few things. I thought we agreed on this. They'll gaslight you into believing you misunderstood, using your own memory against you. You start doubting your recall, wondering if you missed a detail, and that's exactly where they want you. Uncertain, compliant, easy to reshape. What makes this tactic sinister is its timing. It strikes after trust is established, when resistance feels awkward and calling it out feels confrontational. By then, the manipulator doesn't need to convince you. They just need you too tired to fight. Midstream changes aren't about negotiation. They're about quiet dominance. They don't rewrite the deal to find balance. They rewrite it because they know you'll stay even when it's no longer fair. Demand secrecy. Demand secrecy is the manipulator's silent contract, a demand that binds you through fear, guilt, or loyalty while isolating you from truth. It doesn't sound like control at first. It sounds like trust. Don't tell anyone. You're the only one I can share this with. If people knew, they'd never understand. Those words drip with intimacy, but what they really do is build a private cage around you, one lined with false loyalty and hidden shame. Secrecy gives manipulators power because it divides. The moment you agree to hide something, you become their accomplice, even if you don't realize it. They've trapped you not with force, but with silence. Now, every time you think about speaking up, you hear their voice reminding you what's at stake. Embarrassment, betrayal, punishment, loss. That fear becomes a leash you learn to hold yourself. They'll tell you secrecy protects them, or both of you, but it never does. It protects their control. It isolates you from others who could give perspective, grounding, or help. Without outside voices, their version of reality becomes the only one that exists. Over time, secrecy becomes suffocating, but the manipulator keeps framing it as proof of loyalty, making you believe that keeping quiet is love, honor, or duty. Demanding secrecy isn't about privacy, it's about possession. It ensures that what happens stays buried, that their mask remains intact, and that you remain complicit. The cruelest part is how they make you believe that breaking your silence would make you the betrayer, when silence itself was the betrayal they planned from the start. Sign before reading. Sign before reading is the manipulator's ambush, a moment of forced urgency designed to make you commit before your mind can catch up. It's the handshake that hides a handcuff. They'll slide papers across the table with reassuring smiles or drop a verbal, just a quick signature, as if the details don't matter. What they really want is your compliance, not your understanding. The pressure isn't about speed, it's about silence. This tactic preys on social discomfort. Most people hesitate to question what seems routine. The manipulator knows this, so they use tone and timing like weapons. They'll act insulted if you pause, offended if you ask to read. It's standard procedure. Everyone signs this. Don't you trust me? Each phrase is a trap, designed to make due diligence feel like betrayal. They turn your caution into an inconvenience and your signature into surrender. In that moment, your instinct whispers to slow down, but fear of tension drowns it out. You sign to keep peace, to seem agreeable, to move things along, and that's when the damage is done. A single line, a single moment of pressure becomes the key to your loss, your rights, your boundaries, your power. The manipulator counts on your politeness more than your ignorance. They know hesitation feels awkward, so they rush you past it. What's written doesn't need to be fair. It only needs to be signed. And when the truth finally surfaces, they'll shrug and say the words that haunt every victim of this trick. You agreed to it.
Private-only talks.
Private-only talks are the manipulator's favorite stage, the quiet room where truth can't echo, witnesses can't listen, and pressure feels like intimacy. They insist on privacy, not for connection, but for control. Let's keep this between us. We don't need to involve anyone else. Those words sound respectful, even protective, but beneath them lies isolation. The moment you step into their private world, you're cut off from perspective, and that's exactly where they want you. In private, they can rewrite the tone of a conversation, twist meanings, and apply emotional weight that would crumble under public light. They might praise you lavishly, then threaten subtly, all within the same breath. No audience means no accountability. If you later speak up, it becomes your word against theirs, a setup that always favors the one who planned the secrecy. The danger of private-only talks is how easily they mimic trust. You feel special, chosen, even important. They feed your ego with, "I can only tell you this," or "You're the only one who understands." But that exclusivity is a cage, not a gift. It trains you to protect their secrets, even when those secrets start to rot inside you. Behind closed doors, they can push boundaries they'd never dare in daylight. Emotional manipulation, guilt, coercion, all disguised as confidential connection. And when you finally question it, they'll call you disloyal for breaking trust. Private-only talks are never just conversations. They're rehearsals for control, and the silence they demand is the silence that sustains their power. Hook compliments. Hook compliments are the manipulator's bait, sweet words dipped in poison, designed not to uplift you, but to anchor you to their approval. They sound like praise, but they carry a condition, a hook buried beneath the sugar. You're amazing when you actually try. You're not like other people. Don't ruin it. You're so good at this, I'd hate to see you waste your potential. Every compliment comes with a quiet sting, a subtle reminder that your worth depends on their judgment. This tactic preys on your longing to be seen. Real compliments affirm, but hook compliments bind. They make you work for more. The manipulator studies your insecurities, then crafts praise that feeds them, enough to make you feel special, but not enough to make you free. You begin chasing that next fix of approval, adjusting your behavior, your tone, your choices, just to stay in their good graces. Hook compliments are emotional leashes. They're how a manipulator rewards compliance while disguising control as affection. You'll notice they appear right after you start pulling away, or just before you're asked for something. It's not love, it's calibration. They inflate your ego only to twist it into obligation. The danger is how good it feels. You want to believe the words are genuine. You want to believe they see something in you no one else does. But the truth is darker. They see your hunger for validation, and they're feeding it just enough to keep you starving. Immediate reciprocity pressure. Immediate reciprocity pressure is manipulation disguised as generosity. The calculated act of giving you something just to watch you squirm under the weight of debt. It begins with kindness that feels sudden, almost too good to be true, a gift, a favor, a compliment that lands heavy instead of warm. Before you can even say thank you, they're already reminding you, subtly or directly, that now you owe them. This tactic hijacks one of the deepest social instincts, the human need to reciprocate. From childhood, we're taught that fairness means giving back. Manipulators weaponize that instinct, compressing time so you don't get to think. They create urgency. I did this for you. Can you just do this one thing? Or don't make me regret helping you. It's not about kindness. It's about control wrapped in courtesy. The trick lies in the timing. They don't wait for genuine gratitude. They demand repayment while your defenses are still disarmed by surprise. You feel cornered by your own conscience, pressured to prove you're not selfish or ungrateful. That's how people get manipulated into favors, secrets, or sacrifices they never intended to give. This form of pressure turns generosity into a weapon. It makes gratitude feel like guilt and politeness feel like surrender. The manipulator doesn't want your appreciation. They want your obedience. And once you give in, the cycle repeats. Another favor, another debt, another chance for them to tighten the invisible grip. It's not kindness they're offering, it's currency, and the price is always your freedom to say no. Giving up rights. Giving up rights is the manipulator's endgame, the quiet moment when control shifts entirely in their favor, disguised as compromise, trust, or love. It never starts with a demand, it starts with a suggestion. You don't need to worry about that anymore. Let me handle it. It's just a formality. Each word is gentle, reassuring, and dripping with false care. They make surrender sound like relief until you no longer realize what you've handed over. This tactic thrives on exhaustion and affection. The manipulator knows people don't abandon power all at once. They trade it piece by piece. A password here, a signature there, permission to speak, to question, to choose. It feels harmless at first, even comforting, because control is disguised as protection. They convince you that freedom is a burden and obedience is peace. The shift happens so slowly, you mistake it for stability. They'll frame boundaries as selfish, independence as disloyalty, autonomy as chaos. Every time you yield, they praise your trust. Every time you resist, they shame your paranoia. And soon, your own will begin to sound unreasonable, even to you. The cruelty of this trick lies in its elegance. There's no visible chain, no locked door, just invisible permission slips you've unknowingly signed. You wake up one day realizing decisions are made for you, not by you, and that the person who once promised to protect you has quietly rewritten what you're allowed to own, say, or even believe. That's when it hits. You didn't lose your rights. You were persuaded to give them away. Trapping question frames. Trapping question frames are the manipulator's invisible snares, carefully worded questions designed not to discover truth, but to dictate it. They don't ask to learn, they ask to corner. Every question is a setup, a loaded weapon disguised as dialogue. You're not answering to express yourself. You're answering to prove their point. Why are you always overreacting? When did you decide I was the enemy? So you admit you're the problem? Each one is a trap, built to make any response sound like guilt. This tactic is psychological quicksand. The more you explain, the deeper you sink. If you defend yourself, they call it denial. If you stay quiet, they call it confirmation. Manipulators thrive on this structure because it flips the power dynamic. You become the one justifying, clarifying, and scrambling to make sense of their false logic while they sit comfortably in control. Trapping questions are rarely shouted. They're delivered with calm confidence, often laced with feigned confusion or disappointment. Help me understand why you'd do that if you cared. It sounds rational, even gentle, but it's emotional coercion in disguise. They define the premise, and you're forced to operate inside it. The brilliance of this trick lies in its subtlety. It turns the very act of defending yourself into evidence against you. Soon, you find yourself apologizing just to escape the conversation, desperate for relief instead of resolution. Trapping question frames don't seek answers, they seek surrender, and the moment you start explaining yourself to a lie, the truth is already on trial. Rapid concession, then demand. Rapid concession, then demand is one of the most deceptive manipulation maneuvers, a psychological whiplash that disarms you with kindness right before tightening control. It begins with an unexpected gesture of generosity. The manipulator gives in, agrees with you, or backs down faster than you anticipated. Relief washes over you, the tension dissolves, and in that softened moment, they strike with their real objective, a demand you're now too grateful or too stunned to refuse. This tactic works because it flips emotional polarity. When someone who seems stubborn or combative suddenly yields, your guard drops instantly. You feel seen, respected, even victorious. Your brain rewards you with a hit of dopamine, proof that cooperation works. And just as you're basking in that sense of harmony, the manipulator reclaims the upper hand. Of course, I'll do it your way, so you can help me with this small thing in return, right? The ask sounds reasonable, but only because it rides the emotional afterglow of their concession. What's sinister about this technique is how it masquerades as compromise. It feels mutual, balanced, even fair, when in truth, it's a setup. The concession was never a loss for them. It was bait. They give ground not to yield power, but to reset your emotional equilibrium, making their next request feel like reciprocity instead of coercion. By the time you realize what's happened, you're already saying yes, because the manipulator didn't win through argument. They won through rhythm, retreat, relief, and then the quiet demand that feels impossible to decline. Just business moral dodge. The just business moral dodge is the manipulator's shield, a cold phrase used to strip actions of accountability, to sanitize cruelty under the illusion of professionalism. It's the mask of logic worn over greed, betrayal, and exploitation. When someone says, "It's just business," what they're really saying is, "I know this hurts you, but I've already decided your pain doesn't count." This tactic thrives in environments where empathy is seen as weakness. It reframes harm as necessity, turning moral choices into strategic moves. A manipulator uses it to sever emotion from consequence, convincing others and sometimes themselves that stepping on people is simply part of the game. The tone is always detached, efficient, rehearsed. The implication, only fools let conscience interfere with profit, position, or power. But beneath that veneer of reason lies cowardice. The just business excuse is how manipulators dodge guilt without appearing heartless. They'll undercut a partner, betray a promise, fire without cause, or exploit vulnerability, and then wash their hands clean with that one phrase. It's moral anesthesia, numbing the part of them that should feel. What makes this tactic dangerous is its normalization. It creeps into culture, teaching others that success requires callousness, that integrity is optional when stakes are high. The manipulator knows this psychological loophole well. If they can convince you that empathy has no place here, they can do anything and still sleep at night, because when everything becomes just business, nothing is ever truly wrong. Demanding instant trust. Demanding instant trust is the manipulator's shortcut to power, a fast track past your boundaries, straight into your confidence. They don't earn trust, they demand it, wrapping urgency in sincerity. You can trust me, you have to believe me. Why are you being so guarded? Their tone is warm, their eyes steady, their words drenched in assurance. But beneath that calm is an agenda to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. This trick preys on the human need for connection. The manipulator knows that trust takes time, and patience is proof of integrity. So instead, they rush the process, making hesitation look like betrayal. They paint doubt as cruelty, convincing you that questioning them means you're broken or cold. "I thought you were different," they'll say, when what they really mean is stop thinking. By forcing premature intimacy, they disarm you before you can assess who they truly are. You find yourself oversharing, agreeing, confiding, all in the name of being open. They mirror your emotions, make you feel seen, and within days, act as though a lifelong bond exists. Once you've crossed that threshold, they exploit the very trust they demanded, controlling what you reveal, how you feel, and who you believe. The danger of instant trust is that it feels romantic, spiritual, fated. It feels like connection, but it's conquest. Real trust grows in the light. False trust demands darkness, and by the time you realize they never earned your faith, only insisted on it, the walls you should have built have already become their open door. Binary choices. Binary choices are the manipulator's illusion of freedom, a psychological trick that traps you between two options, both of which serve their agenda. It's the classic false dilemma. Are you with me or against me? Do you want to fix this or keep causing problems? On the surface, you're being offered a decision. In reality, your path has already been decided for you. This tactic thrives because it feels empowering at first. The manipulator frames the situation as though they're giving you control, but the frame itself is the prison. By limiting your perspective to two extremes, they erase every nuance that might expose their deception. There's no room for compromise, reflection, or context, only the illusion of choice under pressure. Binary choices are emotional weapons disguised as logic. They appeal to fear, loyalty, or guilt, forcing you to pick the right side just to end the tension. In relationships, it sounds like, if you love me, you do this. In workplaces, you're either loyal or you're not. The manipulator counts on your discomfort with rejection and conflict. They make neutrality feel like betrayal. Over time, this framing conditions obedience. You stop searching for third options, stop questioning the setup, and start choosing whatever keeps the peace. That's the real trick. They don't need to control every decision, only the boundaries of what's possible. Binary choices turn free will into a performance, where no matter what you choose, the outcome belongs to them. Data overwhelm. Data overwhelm is manipulation disguised as intelligence. The calculated flood of information meant not to enlighten you, but to drown you. The manipulator buries you under numbers, jargon, statistics, or endless details, creating the illusion of credibility while quietly suffocating your ability to question. You're left nodding along, overwhelmed and intimidated, afraid to admit you're lost. That's exactly the goal. This tactic exploits the human instinct to equate complexity with authority. When someone speaks in technical language or throws out figures faster than you can process, your brain starts shutting down from cognitive overload. The manipulator knows this. They control the pace, the flow, the chaos, never giving you a moment to pause or reflect. You stop analyzing and start assuming they must know what they're talking about. The moment you surrender understanding, they seize control of the narrative. Data overwhelm often appears in sales pitches, corporate settings, or debates, places where confidence and speed can masquerade as truth. It's all in the report. The numbers clearly show. You wouldn't want to get bogged down in the technical side. Every phrase is a deflection dressed in sophistication. The more confused you are, the more dependent you become on their expertise. What makes this technique dangerous is how rational it looks. There's no shouting, no threats, just an avalanche of words that makes silence feel like ignorance. But beneath the flood, clarity is the casualty, because when the manipulator controls what you can't understand, they don't need to lie. They just need to keep talking until you stop trying to think. Exploiting vulnerabilities. Exploiting vulnerabilities is manipulation at its most predatory, an act of calculated cruelty disguised as care. It begins with attentiveness. The manipulator listens closely, not out of empathy, but reconnaissance. They study your wounds. the insecurities you whisper, the fears you hide, the things that broke you before, and store them like weapons. Every confession you make feels safe in the moment, but later it becomes a tool in their hands. They start by mirroring compassion, wrapping themselves in warmth so you feel understood. You lower your guard, relieved to finally be seen. Then, piece by piece, they twist your openness into leverage. Your loneliness becomes their entry point. Your guilt becomes their anchor. Your need for love becomes their control. You said you didn't want to be alone. They remind you when you try to leave. You told me you couldn't handle failure, they say when you hesitate. Every weakness you shared now binds you. What makes this tactic so devastating is its intimacy. The manipulator doesn't overpower you. They invade you. They make you believe they're your safe place while quietly dismantling your strength. You start to question your worth, your instincts, your sanity, until the only validation that soothes the ache comes from the very person causing it. Exploiting vulnerabilities is not random cruelty, it's precision targeting. They don't attack where you're strong, they go where you're soft, and by the time you see it, they've already turned your deepest truth into their most effective weapon, moving locations. Moving locations is a manipulation tactic cloaked in casual suggestion. Let's go somewhere quieter. Let's talk privately. It's too crowded here. It sounds harmless, even considerate, but its purpose is control. By changing the setting, the manipulator shifts the balance of power. They pull you out of your comfort zone and into theirs, where your awareness weakens and their influence grows. Every environment carries psychological cues, lighting, space, familiarity, that affect how you think and feel. Manipulators exploit this with precision. They move you from open, neutral ground to isolated spaces where witnesses disappear and your instincts feel muted. In public, you might challenge them. In private, you second-guess yourself. The shift is subtle, but the effect is enormous. This tactic is common in negotiations, arguments, and predatory relationships. They might suggest a drive, a walk, a quick talk in a secluded corner. The goal is never the location itself. It's what happens once you're there. Without others around, their tone can harden, their charm can fade, their authority can loom, and if you show hesitation, they'll mask insistence with guilt. Don't you trust me? You're making this weird. The manipulator uses space the way a puppeteer uses strings. Each step away from safety is a step deeper into their control. By the time you notice the quiet, the door, the distance, it's too late. The rules have changed. The place feels smaller. Your voice feels softer. And somewhere between one location and the next, your sense of power has quietly vanished. Broken confidentiality. Broken confidentiality is the manipulator's betrayal disguised as strategy, the deliberate exposure of secrets shared in trust, used as leverage to control or humiliate. It begins with intimacy, late-night confessions, whispered vulnerabilities, promises of "this stays between us." You open your heart because you believe you're safe. But to a manipulator, your truth is not sacred, it's ammunition. The moment they sense resistance or independence, they weaponize what you've shared. A private story becomes public gossip. A personal fear becomes a threat. They'll drop fragments of your secrets into conversations, just enough to make you feel exposed, but not enough to accuse them outright. That subtle violation keeps you constantly uncertain, afraid to speak, afraid to trust, afraid to lose more of yourself. Broken confidentiality creates emotional imprisonment. The manipulator doesn't have to shout or threaten. They just remind you softly that they know things, that they could accidentally let something slip, that your reputation, your relationships, even your peace depend on their silence. It's a leash made of shame, tightened whenever you start to pull away. What makes this tactic so cruel is how personal it feels. They don't steal your money or your status. They steal your privacy, the one thing that makes you feel human. Each disclosure leaves a scar, teaching you that openness is danger and honesty is weakness. Over time, you stop sharing entirely, and that's the goal. When your voice goes quiet out of fear, they no longer need to break your secrets. They've already broken your trust.
Dramatic consequences.
Dramatic consequences are the manipulator's thunderstorm, an explosion of fear designed to make you comply before you even consider resisting. It's the sudden threat of catastrophe if you say no, the vivid warning that everything will fall apart if you don't agree. If you walk away, it's over. You'll regret this forever. Do you really want to be responsible for what happens next? Their words are not reasoned arguments. They're emotional detonations meant to freeze your will. This tactic thrives on exaggerated fear. The manipulator paints the future in extremes, turning a simple disagreement into life or death, loyalty or betrayal, success or ruin. They inflate the stakes until your mind starts to panic, your chest tightens, and logic collapses under the weight of imagined disaster. In that state, compliance feels like safety. You don't agree because you believe them. You agree because you can't bear the terror of what they've made you picture. Dramatic consequences are often delivered with conviction so fierce it feels prophetic. Tears, raised voices, silence heavy with disappointment. Every gesture is theater, choreographed to make you surrender. You start questioning your own stability, wondering if maybe they're right, if maybe saying no really is dangerous. What makes this tactic so cruel is that it doesn't rely on truth. It relies on your capacity to feel. The manipulator doesn't need to prove the threat. They just need to make you feel it. And once your fear takes over, they don't have to push anymore. You'll run straight into the cage on your own. You're the only one. You're the only one is one of the most seductive lies in manipulation, a phrase wrapped in intimacy designed to make you feel irreplaceable while quietly isolating you from everyone else. It sounds like devotion, like loyalty, like love, but in a manipulator's mouth, it's not affection, it's control disguised as flattery. When someone says, "You're the only one who understands me," or "I can only trust you," what they're really doing is building a cage made of importance. They hand you the key and make you believe you're holding power. In truth, you're holding responsibility for their emotions, their secrets, their chaos. You stop questioning them because you don't want to lose that special status. You become the confidant, the savior, the chosen one. And once that identity settles in, you'll do almost anything to protect it. This phrase isolates you with tenderness. It cuts you off from outside perspective by turning others into threats. They don't get it like you do. You're the only one who really sees me. Bit by bit, you stop seeking balance because they've made you feel like balance equals betrayal. The manipulator uses your need to feel unique as the leash. The more you believe you're the exception, the more you ignore the pattern. You don't see that they've said the same words before to others who thought they were the only one too. You're the only one isn't love. It's possession wearing the mask of intimacy, veiled threats. Veiled threats are the manipulator's whisper of danger, a soft, chilling promise that harm will come if you don't obey, though never spoken outright. It's the "I'd hate for something to happen," the "you know how things can go wrong," the "I wouldn't want people to get the wrong idea." Each phrase is coded in calmness, but beneath the politeness hums menace. The threat hides in suggestion, making you question whether it was ever said at all. This tactic thrives on ambiguity. The manipulator never needs to say what they'll do, only that you'll regret it if you don't comply. That uncertainty is what makes it so effective. Your mind fills in the blanks, conjuring fears more powerful than any explicit warning. It's psychological warfare, forcing you to police yourself, to shrink before the blade even leaves its sheath. Veiled threats often come from those who smile as they tighten the noose. They use charm to disguise coercion, ensuring there's no proof of their cruelty. To outsiders, they seem reasonable, even kind, but you feel the tension in your gut, the way their tone shifts just enough to remind you of what's at stake. It's not a demand, It's a promise of consequence. The danger of this manipulation is how invisible it appears. You start to censor your words, your choices, your truth, not because you've been attacked, but because you fear you might be. The manipulator doesn't need to raise their voice. They've already colonized your mind. You obey not from respect, but from the quiet terror of what could happen if you don't. Weaponizing past mistakes. Weaponizing past mistakes is one of the manipulator's most brutal tactics, a constant resurrection of your worst moments to keep you in a cycle of guilt and submission. It's not about accountability, it's about control. Every time you gain confidence, they drag out your history like evidence in a courtroom that never ends. Remember what you did? You've done this before. You can't talk about trust after what happened. Each reminder reopens wounds you thought had healed. This strategy works because it shackles you to your own regret. The manipulator knows that good people crave forgiveness, that remorse makes them soft, so they twist your empathy against you, replaying your mistakes until you forget you've already paid for them. It doesn't matter how long ago it was, how much you've grown, or how sincere your apologies were. Your past becomes their permanent weapon. In moments of argument or resistance, they'll hurl your old errors like grenades, instantly shifting the balance of power. Suddenly, the original issue disappears, and you're forced to defend your character all over again. It's emotional blackmail disguised as memory, and it keeps you trapped in a loop where you're always guilty and they're always righteous. The cruelty of this manipulation lies in its precision. They don't invent lies. They use your truth against you. And with each reminder, you shrink a little more, internalizing the belief that you deserve the punishment. Eventually, you stop standing up for yourself, not because they're right, but because they've convinced you you're still wrong. "Oh me" claims. "Oh me" claims are emotional debt traps, carefully crafted reminders that turn kindness into currency and generosity into leverage. The manipulator gives something: help, attention, favors, sympathy, but every act comes with an invisible price tag. Later, when you hesitate, they cash in with quiet venom. "After everything I've done for you, you wouldn't even have this without me." Gratitude becomes guilt, and you find yourself paying for a debt you never agreed to owe. This tactic thrives on the illusion of goodwill. In the beginning, the manipulator seems selfless, generous, the kind of person who's always there. They build a sense of obligation in you, one small act at a time. You start to trust them, to lean on them, to feel that maybe you do owe them something. But the moment you assert independence, that generosity turns to accusation. Every gift is thrown back like evidence of betrayal. The cruelty lies in its subtlety. You feel trapped not because you're forced, but because you're ashamed. You replay every favor, every time they helped, and question whether you're being ungrateful for wanting freedom. That's the hook. They weaponize your integrity against you. "Oh me" claims are never about fairness. They're about control. The manipulator doesn't want repayment. They want dominance disguised as morality. They rewrite kindness as contract so that every boundary you draw feels like a broken promise. And once you start apologizing for debts you never signed up for, you've already surrendered something far greater than gratitude. You've surrendered your right to say no. Guilt stories. Guilt stories are the manipulator's theater, crafted narratives of suffering and sacrifice meant to make you feel responsible for their pain. They're not just stories, they're emotional traps dressed as vulnerability. The manipulator plays the victim with exquisite precision, recounting tales of betrayal, heartbreak, or hardship, all designed to trigger your compassion and silence your boundaries. Every detail is chosen to hook your empathy, to make you think, how could I ever add to their pain? It begins with soft sadness, a tremor in the voice, eyes that plead for understanding. They tell you about the people who wronged them, the times they were abandoned, the sacrifices they made for others who didn't deserve it. But listen closely. There's always a moral hidden beneath the tears. Don't hurt me like they did. Don't leave me. You owe me kindness. Guilt stories work because they make decency feel dangerous. Saying no starts to feel cruel. Setting a boundary feels like betrayal. You begin carrying emotional debts you never agreed to pay, trying to make it up to someone who was never truly wounded, just skilled at performing pain. And when you start to pull away, they'll remind you of everything they've been through, twisting your empathy into obedience. You'll stay longer, give more, apologize for things that were never your fault, all to keep from becoming the villain in their story. Guilt stories aren't cries for help, they're scripts of control. And the moment you believe their pain is your burden, the story stops being theirs and becomes your cage. Blocked verification. Blocked verification is the manipulator's firewall, the deliberate obstruction of your ability to confirm the truth. It's when every question you ask hits a wall of excuses. You'll just have to trust me. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand. They speak in half answers, hide behind authority, or drown you in irrelevant details until your curiosity feels like an insult. Their goal isn't to convince you, it's to exhaust you into silence. This tactic thrives where power depends on secrecy. The manipulator knows that verification is the death of deception, so they make access impossible. They guard documents, isolate you from witnesses, and insist on privacy under the guise of confidentiality. If you press too hard, they flip the script, accusing you of paranoia, disloyalty, or disrespect. Suddenly, you become the problem for wanting proof. Blocked verification creates a psychological trap, uncertainty. The mind craves closure, and when answers are withheld, anxiety grows. The manipulator uses that tension to their advantage, offering small pieces of information, just enough to keep you guessing, but never enough to confirm. Over time, you stop seeking truth and start seeking peace, accepting whatever version they offer just to end the unease. This is how control sustains itself, not through lies alone, but through the prevention of clarity. The manipulator doesn't need you to believe them completely. They only need to keep you from knowing for sure, because as long as you can't verify, you can't act. And in that suspended uncertainty, they rule, not with truth, but with the power to deny you access to it. Asked to break rules. Being asked to break rules is the manipulator's invitation into corruption, an offer that sounds like trust, but reeks of danger. It begins with a quiet whisper of loyalty. No one has to know. You're the only one I can count on for this. What feels like a secret bond is really the first step into compromise. The manipulator doesn't just want your help, they want your complicity, because once you cross the line, even slightly, they own a piece of you. This tactic is about entanglement. By convincing you to bend the rules, skip a step, hide a detail, lie for a good reason, they make you part of their deception. Now, if you ever challenge them, they can point back and say, "You did it too." Your integrity becomes a hostage, your silence, the ransom. It's a slow infection. One small exception turns into a pattern, and soon you're defending choices you never would have made on your own. The manipulator frames it as loyalty, opportunity, or necessity. Everyone does it. You'll thank me later. They use warmth, urgency, even flattery to make the forbidden feel noble. But beneath it all lies the real motive, to blur your boundaries until right and wrong are indistinguishable. The danger isn't just what you do, it's what it changes in you. Once you've broken a rule for someone, they never have to threaten you. You'll police yourself, terrified of exposure. That's when they've truly won, not when you disobey the rules, but when you stop trusting your own conscience. Special silence deals. Special silence deals are the manipulator's most seductive trap, an invitation into secrecy disguised as trust. It begins with a whisper, a lowered voice, a look that says you're different. They confide something private, forbidden, or just between us, pulling you into a bond that feels intimate and rare. In that moment, you feel chosen, privileged to hold a truth others can't. But what feels like connection is really containment. The secret isn't a gift, it's a leash. This tactic thrives on exclusivity. By making you the keeper of their secret, the manipulator binds you to them emotionally and morally. You start to feel responsible for their reputation, their peace, even their lies. And once you accept the silence, you become complicit, because breaking it feels like betrayal. That's how they trap you, not with threats, but with loyalty. Soon, the silence deepens. You're told not to share certain details, not to question certain behaviors, not to speak to certain people. Each favor tightens the net. The manipulator frames it as mutual trust, but it's always one-sided. You guard their truth while they manipulate yours. What makes special silence deals so dangerous is that they feel sacred. You tell yourself you're protecting someone who trusts you, but in reality, you're protecting the very person exploiting that trust. The secret becomes a prison disguised as intimacy, and by the time you realize it, your silence isn't loyalty anymore. It's their power living in your throat. Discourage counsel. Discourage counsel is the manipulator's quiet sabotage, the deliberate effort to cut you off from voices that could wake you up. It begins subtly, wrapped in care. You don't need to tell them everything. They don't really understand us. People will just confuse you. These phrases sound protective, even intimate, but they serve one purpose: to isolate you from perspective. The less you hear from others, the easier you are to control. Manipulators fear witnesses. Advice from friends, family, or mentors threatens the illusion they've built around you. So they chip away at your trust in others, casting doubt, planting seeds of suspicion. They'll tell you your loved ones are jealous, that outsiders can't grasp your connection, that talking about your problems means disloyalty. Soon, you begin to internalize it. You hesitate before reaching out, feeling guilty for even considering it. This tactic works because it exploits your loyalty and your desire for harmony. It reframes isolation as intimacy. It's just you and me. But that closeness is a cage disguised as devotion. Once you're cut off from counsel, the manipulator's voice becomes the only one you hear, the only truth that feels safe. The longer it continues, the more you forget what objectivity sounds like. Every doubt feels like betrayal. Every warning from others feels like noise. And that's when the manipulator wins, when you stop seeking guidance, because they've convinced you that love means silence. Discouraging counsel isn't protection, it's possession, disguised as trust. Gaslit timelines. Gaslit timelines are psychological warfare, disguised as confusion, a manipulator's way of rewriting history until you no longer trust your own memory. It begins with small corrections. That's not how it happened. You're mixing things up. You're remembering it wrong. Each phrase chips away at your certainty, bending the truth a little further each time. Eventually, you start to hesitate before speaking, doubting not just what you recall, but whether you can recall at all. This tactic works because memory is fragile. The manipulator exploits that fragility, planting false markers in your mind while erasing real ones. They blur sequences of events, switch cause and effect, and insist that you agreed, you knew, you said, when you didn't. They repeat it so often, with such confidence, that your brain begins to fill in the blanks. The lie becomes easier to live with than the constant battle to defend reality. Gaslit timelines are common in toxic relationships, workplaces, and power hierarchies. They're used to rewrite blame, to justify betrayal, to recast cruelty as misunderstanding. Over time, you lose your grip on linear truth. You question whether the promises broken were ever made, whether the pain you feel was ever justified. The manipulator's victory isn't just in deceiving you, it's in making you rewrite your own past on their behalf. By controlling memory, they control meaning, and when you no longer trust the story of what happened, they become the author of every version that follows.
Complex contracts, hiding traps.
Complex contracts, hiding traps are manipulation dressed as professionalism, a web of legal language, fine print, and endless clauses designed to confuse, exhaust, and corner you. On the surface, it all looks legitimate. thick documents, polished tone, impressive jargon. But beneath that polished exterior lies deception crafted with precision. The manipulator knows that the thicker the paper, the thinner your defenses become. This tactic weaponizes overwhelm. When you face pages of dense terms and conditional clauses, your brain naturally shuts down. You skim, you trust, you sign, believing that anyone so official must be acting in good faith. That's exactly what they're counting on. The trap isn't in the obvious text. It's buried in the exceptions, the definitions, the subtle shifts in phrasing that turn rights into liabilities. One misplaced word can transform freedom into obligation. Manipulators use these contracts to appear transparent while ensuring they hold all the power. They'll rush your signature, assure you it's standard, discourage outside advice, or even feign offense when you ask for time to review. It's not business. It's entrapment disguised as opportunity. The most chilling part is how guilt is used to seal the deal. You're made to feel ungrateful or paranoid for wanting clarity. So you sign, convincing yourself it's fine. But later, when the trap springs, you realize it wasn't a contract. It was a cage. Every clause, every line, every unread sentence was a thread, woven carefully to bind you while making it look like you agreed to be tied. Reputational threats. Reputational threats are the manipulator's sword of shame, a psychological weapon forged from fear and silence. They don't need to attack you directly, they just need to hint at what could happen if you stop cooperating. It'd be a shame if people knew what really happened. I'd hate for this to get out. You know how rumors spread. Those words carry a chill that freezes your spine because they don't just threaten your image, they threaten your identity. This tactic feeds on vulnerability. The manipulator studies what you care about most, your career, relationships, credibility, and positions themselves as the one who could destroy it. Sometimes they hold real secrets. Other times they bluff, counting on your terror to keep you quiet. They know that reputation is a kind of social oxygen and that even the suggestion of scandal can suffocate. Reputational threats turn dignity into a hostage. You begin policing your own behavior, your words, even your thoughts, just to avoid provoking them. They no longer need to control you. They've taught you to control yourself. And the most insidious part, they often play the victim while doing it. I don't want to hurt you, but don't force my hand. I'm just protecting myself. The cruelty is framed as self-defense. What makes reputational threats so devastating is their invisibility. The damage happens in the shadows. Your silence, your anxiety, your gradual disappearance from yourself. The manipulator doesn't have to ruin your name to win. They just have to make you live in fear that they could. Topic shifts to dodge commitment. Topic shifting is the manipulator's elegant escape, the art of slipping out of accountability by changing the subject just as the truth draws near. It's a psychological sidestep, performed with charm, humor, or sudden intensity, designed to disarm you before you notice the evasion. You ask a direct question, "So are you going to do it?" And they smile, laugh, or sigh, turning the moment into something else entirely. You worry too much. Let's not ruin the mood. The real issue is, and just like that, your clarity dissolves into confusion. This tactic preys on your social instincts. You don't want to seem pushy, rude, or confrontational, so you let the conversation drift. The manipulator counts on that. They thrive in fog. By keeping the focus moving, by joking, redirecting, or feigning offense, they avoid having to commit to anything real. The more you try to pin them down, the slipperier they become. What makes this so dangerous is its subtlety. It doesn't feel like lying. It feels like dancing. They'll charm you with words, draw your attention elsewhere, and by the time you realize you never got an answer, the moment's gone. You leave feeling unsettled but unsure why. Over time, repeated topic shifts train you to stop asking. You learn that pressing for clarity leads nowhere, that discomfort isn't worth the effort, And that's exactly what they want, to keep you endlessly engaged but never empowered, trapped in conversations that go in circles until you forget there was ever a straight line to begin with. Manufactured scarcity. Manufactured scarcity is manipulation through panic, a calculated illusion that something rare or fleeting must be seized now before it's gone forever. It's the last chance, the limited time only, the one spot left that presses your urgency button and shuts off your reasoning. The manipulator doesn't need genuine value. They just need you to feel the ticking clock. Scarcity doesn't create worth. It creates fear. This tactic hijacks your survival instincts. Throughout evolution, scarcity meant danger. If food or shelter ran out, life was at risk. Manipulators know this reflex runs deep. They trigger it to make you compete, comply, and commit faster than logic would ever allow. You see it in sales pitches, in toxic relationships, in workplaces that pit loyalty against opportunity. If you don't take this now, someone else will. You'll never get an offer like this again. People are lining up for your spot. The trick works because it replaces evaluation with desperation. You stop asking, "Do I want this?" and start thinking, "Can I afford to lose it?" Every rational question dissolves in the heat of imagined loss. And when fear takes hold, you cling not to the offer itself, but to the illusion of control. By the time you realize the scarcity was fake, the deal is done, the boundary is crossed, or the leash is already tight around your neck. Manufactured scarcity isn't about limited options. It's about limiting you, because the moment you believe there's not enough, you'll give anything just to avoid being left with nothing. Urgent tone. An urgent tone is the manipulator's siren, loud, relentless, and designed to drown out your reason. It's the sharp edge of pressure that makes you act before you think. When someone speaks with urgency, their voice cuts through your calm like an alarm bell, flooding you with adrenaline. Suddenly, you feel like something terrible will happen if you don't comply immediately. That's the illusion they need you to believe. This tactic thrives on panic. The manipulator will talk fast, heighten the stakes, and flood you with emotional urgency. We have to decide now. This can't wait. You'll lose everything if you hesitate. The goal isn't to inform, it's to overwhelm. They know that once your nervous system shifts into survival mode, logic shuts down. You stop analyzing and start obeying. Urgency turns thinking people into compliant ones. In relationships, it sounds like desperation. In business, like opportunity. The manipulator mimics importance so convincingly that pausing feels dangerous. They blur the line between emergency and manipulation, turning your need to act responsibly into a weapon against you. And by the time you realize there was no real crisis, you've already given them what they wanted: your agreement, your silence, or your trust. An urgent tone doesn't reveal truth, it conceals it. The noise is the cover. The louder they push, the less time you have to notice the holes in their story. And that's the point, to keep you running fast enough that by the time you look back, the damage is already done. Fake endorsements. Fake endorsements are manipulation dressed in credibility, a crafted illusion of trust built from borrowed authority. The manipulator knows that people believe what others seem to support, so they fabricate approval, inflate connections, or drop impressive names to validate themselves. Everyone loves what I'm doing. I work closely with them. They've already agreed. Each statement is bait, designed to short-circuit your skepticism before you even start questioning. This tactic thrives on social proof, the human tendency to follow the crowd, especially when we're uncertain. By invoking non-existent praise or fabricated backing, manipulators create a false consensus around their narrative. They speak with confidence, sprinkle in just enough plausible detail, and let your imagination do the rest. You begin to trust them, not because of what they've done, but because you think others already have. It's a psychological shortcut. Why investigate what seems already verified? Fake endorsements appear everywhere, A business deal padded with imaginary investors, a social influencer claiming invisible support, a colleague name-dropping powerful friends. Each false signal pushes you to lower your guard, to believe you're stepping into something safe, respected, or popular. What makes this trick so dangerous is its invisibility in real time. You often don't see the lie until the damage is done. After the name was never returned, the quote never existed, the partner was never real. The manipulator doesn't need the endorsement to be true, they just need it to sound true long enough for you to say yes. And by the time truth catches up, your trust is already spent. Flattery to cloud judgment. Flattery to cloud judgment is manipulation disguised as admiration, the velvet rope that leads straight into a trap. It's not genuine appreciation, it's calculated influence. The manipulator studies what you crave, respect, validation, significance, and feeds it back to you in doses so sweet you don't notice the poison underneath. You're incredible at this. You're smarter than the rest. I knew you'd understand. Each word is a mirror reflecting what you want to believe about yourself, blinding you with your own reflection. This tactic works because flattery quiets reason. When someone praises us, our brains release dopamine and oxytocin, creating trust before proof. The manipulator exploits that rush, knowing that praise softens scrutiny. You stop questioning motives because it feels good to be seen. It's not persuasion through logic, it's persuasion through ego. Soon, you start mistaking their admiration for honesty. You overlook inconsistencies, excuse red flags, even defend them when others raise doubts. The flattery becomes a fog, dulling your instincts. You think you're being valued, when really you're being used. The manipulator's goal isn't to lift you, it's to lull you. They build you up just enough to guide your decisions, to make you more compliant, more forgiving, more blind. And when the charm fades, you'll wonder how you missed the signs. It's because flattery doesn't just inflate the ego, it anesthetizes the mind. When judgment sleeps, manipulation thrives, and you never realize the strings were woven from compliments all along. Asking to lie is one of the darkest manipulations, an invitation to step across a moral line, not for yourself, but for them. It begins innocently, almost playfully. Just say I wasn't there. Don't mention that part. It's harmless. No one will ever know. But beneath the surface lies a sinister transaction. The moment you agree, the manipulator owns a piece of you, not through force, but through shared guilt. This tactic isn't about the lie itself. It's about corruption through compliance. By convincing you to twist the truth, they tether you to their deceit. Once you participate, you become an accomplice, whether you meant to or not. That's the real power. You can't call them out without exposing yourself. They've made silence your cage and complicity your collar. The manipulator counts on your empathy, your loyalty, or your fear of conflict. They'll minimize the lie. It's not a big deal. You're just helping me out. Everyone bends the truth sometimes, but deep down, you feel the shift. The discomfort in your gut is your conscience recognizing the trap, because once you've lied for them, it becomes easier for them to lie to you. Over time, this dynamic poisons trust and identity alike. You begin to rationalize the dishonesty, to see morality as flexible, to protect the one who's using you. That's how they win, not by deceiving others, but by teaching you to betray your own integrity. And when truth finally surfaces, you'll realize they never wanted your honesty. They only wanted your silence. Unverifiable evidence. Unverifiable evidence is the manipulator's illusion of proof. Claims draped in authority, but anchored in nothing. It's the screenshot with no source, the story that can't be confirmed, the vague reference to what everyone knows. They use it to give their lies the weight of truth, knowing most people won't dig deeper. The trick isn't in the evidence itself, it's in how confidently it's presented. Manipulators understand that certainty is magnetic. When they speak with conviction, I've seen the messages, I have proof but can't show you. Multiple people told me the same thing. Your mind fills in the gaps. Doubting them feels paranoid. Believing them feels safe. They rely on your desire for clarity, feeding you just enough detail to make the lie feel real, but never enough to verify it. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its invisibility. They'll wrap their claims in emotion, hurt, outrage, disappointment, so questioning the evidence feels cruel. They may even feign vulnerability. I wish I could show you, but I have to protect others. It's theater disguised as honesty, and the audience is you. The danger is how easily this false proof reshapes reality. Once the seed is planted, your mind does the rest. Doubt festers, trust crumbles, and perception shifts. Even if you never see the evidence, its shadow lingers. The manipulator doesn't need to prove the lie. They just need you to imagine it vividly enough to believe it. And by the time you ask for proof, they've already won, because the damage isn't in the evidence, it's in the belief. Final word, trust me. Final word, trust me, is the manipulator's closing move, the verbal door slam that shuts down all doubt and discussion. It's delivered with finality, a tone that says, this conversation is over. When they say it, they're not asking for trust, they're demanding it. The phrase is a power play disguised as intimacy, a command wrapped in the illusion of sincerity. It signals that logic has no seat at the table anymore. Only loyalty does. This tactic preys on emotional fatigue. By the time someone reaches trust me, they've likely dodged your questions, blurred their facts, or tangled you in contradictions. You're confused, uneasy, and craving resolution, and that's when they deliver it. Their voice softens, their eyes lock on yours, and they frame compliance as connection. You have to believe me. Please, just trust me on this. It feels like a bridge being built, but it's actually a wall, one that keeps truth on the other side. The phrase also manipulates your conscience. If you resist, you feel cruel, like you're betraying faith or being paranoid. If you comply, you feel moral, loyal, good. It's a psychological trap where doubt equals disloyalty. That's why it works so effectively. It replaces reason with emotion and disguises submission as virtue. Final word, trust me isn't a reassurance, it's a silencer. It doesn't end the argument because it's right. It ends it because you've been cornered. And once you accept those words as truth, the manipulator doesn't need evidence anymore. They've already turned belief itself into your blindfold. In-group/out-group. In-group/out-group manipulation is the dark psychology of belonging, the primal divide between us and them that turns connection into control. It's a tactic as old as humanity itself, weaponizing our instinct to belong against us. The manipulator doesn't need to threaten you outright. They simply make you fear exile. They build a circle, an in-group, and then convince you that being part of it defines your worth. Outside that circle lies rejection, ridicule, or irrelevance. It begins with inclusion. You get it. We're not like the others. Only a few people understand. Those words pull you in, making you feel chosen, special, elevated. You start adapting to their values, their language, their worldview, because belonging feels intoxicating. But the real power comes next. Exclusion. Once you're attached, the manipulator hints that dissent means disloyalty, that questioning the group threatens unity. You stop thinking freely because freedom feels like isolation. This tactic thrives in workplaces, relationships, religions, even politics, anywhere the fear of being an outsider can override reason. The manipulator keeps the group close through shared secrets, rituals, or enemies. They wouldn't understand. Don't listen to them. The walls close in, and soon your entire sense of identity is defined by who you stand with and who you stand against. In-group/out-group manipulation is psychological warfare dressed as belonging. It doesn't enslave you with force, but with acceptance. And once your need for approval outweighs your need for truth, the manipulator doesn't need chains. They just need to whisper, "You're one of us." and watch you build your own cage. Loyalty for access. Loyalty for access is manipulation dressed as privilege, the illusion that devotion earns opportunity, when in truth it buys submission. The manipulator dangles inclusion like a prize. Stick with me and I'll take care of you. You're one of the few I trust. Not everyone gets this kind of access. It feels flattering, even intoxicating, to be chosen. But what you're really being given isn't access, it's dependence. This tactic thrives on exclusivity. The manipulator builds a hierarchy where loyalty is currency and transparency is forbidden. They convince you that your proximity to them is special, that others can't be trusted, that your worth is measured by how unwaveringly you serve. Each secret shared, each privilege granted, pulls you deeper into a circle that isn't about belonging. It's about control. Over time, the access they grant becomes the very thing you fear losing. You start censoring yourself, defending them, even justifying their cruelty, because speaking out means exile. The manipulator knows this and uses it to test your loyalty, forcing you to choose between your values and your place in their world. If you were really loyal, you wouldn't question me. You're either with us or against us. What makes loyalty for access so dangerous is how seductive it feels. It mimics trust, mimics mentorship, mimics love, but it's all conditional. The moment your loyalty falters, the door slams shut, and you're left realizing the access you fought to protect was never freedom at all. It was a cage made of approval, and the key was never in your hands. Speed to hide risk. Speed to hide risk is the manipulator's sleight of hand, the art of moving so fast you don't see what's missing. It's the deal that can't wait, the project that must launch immediately, the decision that's too urgent for red tape. Beneath the rush lies the rot, hidden clauses, unspoken consequences, and dangers carefully buried under momentum. The manipulator's greatest fear isn't exposure, it's your pause, because in stillness, truth catches up. This tactic thrives on velocity. By accelerating the pace, they blur your awareness. You're too busy keeping up to ask questions, too caught in motion to notice the cracks. They overload you with tasks, deadlines, and emotional pressure, creating a false sense of inevitability. It's happening either way. You don't want to be the reason this fails. The faster you move, the more you trust them to steer. That's when the trap sets in. Speed is seductive because it feels like progress. The manipulator weaponizes that energy, turning drive into distraction, ambition into blindness. They know hesitation looks like fear, so they shame you for wanting time. Why are you slowing us down? Don't you believe in this? And so you push forward, even as doubt gnaws quietly beneath the surface. By the time you notice the risks, the damage is already done. The papers are signed, the promises made, the exit blocked. That's the beauty of their trick. You don't have to agree blindly. They just have to keep you too busy to see where you're walking. Speed hides what scrutiny would expose. Threaten to cut off. Threaten to cut off is a brutal form of emotional extortion, the calculated threat of sudden abandonment used to bend you into submission. It sounds simple. If you do that, I'll walk away, or don't push me and don't expect me to be around. But beneath those words is a deliberate strategy. Weaponize your fear of loss to control your choices. The manipulator knows exactly which relationships you value and uses the possibility of their removal like a scalpel, slicing away your courage until you comply. This threat targets the deepest human terror, isolation. Our brains are wired to avoid being cast out. Social pain activates the same regions as physical pain. So when someone dangles departure as punishment, silence, cold shoulder, cutting access to friends, money, or affection, you feel raw, aching, and driven to avert it at almost any cost. The tactic looks mercilessly simple because it is. You'll bend rules, swallow pride, and erase boundaries to keep from becoming lonely, guilty, or exposed. Often, the threat is subtle: a withheld text, a delayed reply, a vague, I might not be here. So you never quite know where you stand. Sometimes it's explicit, leave me and you'll regret it, or I'll cut you off from everyone who cares. Either way, the aim is the same. Make your life feel smaller without them so you stay obedient. Over time, constant fear of being cut off rewires your behavior. You become hypervigilant, apologetic, and responsible for someone else's presence. It's not love, it's hostage-taking disguised as consequence, and the price they demand is the very self you were born to keep. Oral-only deals. Oral-only deals are the manipulator's playground, a handshake built on air, a promise designed to disappear. We don't need to put it in writing. You have my word. Let's keep this between us. The words sound personal, trustworthy, even honorable, but beneath that friendly tone lies a trap, a deal with no proof, no record, no accountability. Once you agree, the manipulator owns the story, and they'll rewrite it the moment it serves them. This tactic thrives on false intimacy. They make documentation feel cold, unnecessary, even insulting. Do you really think I'd screw you over? They'll say, masking deceit as wounded pride. It's a performance meant to make you feel rude for protecting yourself. But the real purpose of an unwritten agreement is freedom, not yours, theirs. Freedom to deny, distort, or vanish when it's time to deliver. Oral-only deals prey on emotion, on trust, on urgency, on your desire to believe in good faith. They feel fast, easy, clean. There's no paper trail, no legal strings, just shared understanding, until that understanding suddenly changes. When you confront them later, they'll swear you misheard, misremembered, misunderstood, and with no proof, the truth dies quietly in the gap between your word and theirs. The cruel genius of this tactic is how polite it looks. It flatters your honor, your confidence, your wish to believe in integrity. But every gentleman's agreement made without witnesses is an open invitation for betrayal, because in the manipulator's world, what isn't written never existed, and what never existed can't be broken. Normalizing unethical acts. Normalizing unethical acts is one of the manipulator's most corrosive tactics. Slow, deliberate moral erosion disguised as practicality. It doesn't begin with something shocking. It begins with something small, something easy to justify. It's just a white lie. Everyone does it. It's not a big deal. Each tiny step pushes your boundaries a little further, until one day you're standing in a place you once swore you'd never go, and it all feels strangely normal. The manipulator's goal isn't to shock you, it's to desensitize you. They introduce wrongdoing in digestible doses, framed as harmless, even necessary. Maybe it's bending a rule for efficiency, or covering up a mistake for the greater good. With every repetition, your discomfort fades, replaced by rationalization. It's not corruption by force, it's corruption by repetition. This tactic thrives on group dynamics. When someone in authority shrugs off dishonesty or exploitation, others follow suit, afraid to seem naive or disloyal. The manipulator knows this. They create an environment where silence equals complicity, and complicity becomes culture. Soon, integrity feels inconvenient, and the people who question it are labeled difficult, dramatic, or self-righteous. What makes this tactic so dangerous is how quietly it reshapes your sense of right and wrong. You start out compromising for the team, for the goal, for survival, and end up complicit in something you no longer recognize. The manipulator doesn't need to make you evil. They just need to make you comfortable with what you once believed was wrong. By the time you realize what's happened, your conscience has been rewritten. And the worst part is, it feels justified. Bypass process. Bypassing process is the manipulator's shortcut to power, cutting through rules, protocols, or checks with casual confidence so they can move faster than accountability. It's the whispered, "we'll handle it off the books," the plea to ignore procedure for the sake of convenience, relationship, or speed. When someone asks you to skip steps, sign exceptions, or accept verbal assurances, in place of documented agreements, they aren't streamlining work. They're removing witnesses and safeguards that would expose them later. This tactic preys on your desire to be helpful, efficient, or loyal. People want problems solved. They want obstacles removed. So when a charismatic figure proposes a neat bypass, it feels like relief. You imagine expedited results, favors returned, and the satisfaction of being the person who gets things done. But convenience traded for oversight is a doorway to abuse. Without paper trails, approvals, or checks, actions become untraceable, and mistakes or malfeasance can be hidden behind plausible explanations. Manipulators use process bypass to isolate decisions and erode collective responsibility. They frame exceptions as trust tests. If you believe in them, you'll waive the rules. They call bureaucracy slow, say protocols are for lesser people, and claim formalities are needless when we're on the same team. Those lines sound noble until you realize the cost: your voice, your protection, your ability to challenge wrongdoing. The danger is incremental. Small exceptions normalize larger ones. Accountability fades into memory. By the time suspicion surfaces, the precedent is the rule and reversal feels impossible. Bypass the process once and you've unknowingly opened a corridor where secrecy walks in wearing the mask of efficiency. One left claims are manipulation through scarcity, the calculated illusion that you're about to miss out on something rare, precious, or exclusive. It's the voice that says, "This is the last one, only one spot remains," or, "If you don't act now, it's gone." It's not about urgency, it's about panic, engineered to override your reasoning and push you into action before you can ask why it's so urgent in the first place. This tactic exploits a primal instinct rooted in survival. Scarcity heightens desire. When something appears limited, your brain interprets it as valuable. The manipulator knows this. They create artificial competition, making you feel as if unseen others are waiting to snatch away your chance. It doesn't matter if the product, job, or relationship offer is truly scarce. What matters is that you believe it is. Under that illusion, hesitation feels dangerous. The emotional pull is immediate. You stop analyzing and start reacting. The manipulator's tone becomes sympathetic, even helpful. "I'd hate for you to miss this." But beneath the politeness is control. You're no longer making a choice, you're racing a clock they invented. What makes one left claim so powerful is that they transform opportunity into fear. It's not the promise of gain that drives you, it's the terror of loss. And by the time you realize that the scarcity was scripted, that there was never just one left, the manipulator has already taken what they wanted, leaving you holding nothing but the urgency they sold you. Impossible promises. Impossible promises are the manipulator's illusion of salvation, the shining bait dangled just out of reach. They offer you everything you've ever wanted, wrapped in conviction so convincing it feels divine. "I'll change. You'll never have to worry again. We're going to change the world together." Each word burns with hope, but none of it is real. The promise exists only to make you stay, to keep you believing, waiting, obeying. This tactic preys on your longing. Manipulators sense what you crave most: security, love, success, redemption, and offer it in impossible proportions. They don't need to deliver. They just need to sound like they could. The fantasy does the work for them. You fill in the blanks with faith, crafting a future that feels so vivid you can taste it. Every time reality cracks, they patch it with another promise. Next time, soon, just trust me. And so the waiting becomes endless. The emotional pull of impossible promises lies in their rhythm. They alternate between despair and reassurance, pain and hope. You suffer, but you're told it's temporary. You're told the reward is coming if you stay patient, loyal, forgiving. You start to confuse endurance with strength, devotion with destiny. But the manipulator never intended to fulfill anything. They feed on your anticipation, because as long as you're hoping, you're not leaving. Impossible promises don't build futures, they erase the present. They keep you chasing a tomorrow that was never meant to exist until you realize the miracle they sold you was never a plan, it was a leash. Secret deals from stakeholders. Secret deals from stakeholders are betrayal disguised as strategy. The quiet pacts made behind closed doors while everyone else operates in good faith. It's when the manipulator whispers promises to one side, reassures another, and smiles through meetings where the outcome has already been decided. These hidden alliances rot trust from within, leaving teams, families, or partnerships chasing transparency that was never meant to exist. The manipulator justifies secrecy as necessity. It's better if we keep this between us. Others wouldn't understand. We'll tell them when the time is right. Each phrase drips with false prudence, painting deceit as wisdom. But the real goal is power, to control the narrative, the timing, and the flow of information so everyone else remains one step behind. They position themselves as the gatekeeper of truth, deciding who deserves to know and when. This tactic thrives in environments built on collaboration, where loyalty and trust are assumed. By striking private bargains, the manipulator fractures unity, pitting people against one another before they even realize it. When the truth emerges, chaos follows, confusion, denial, shame. The victims turn on each other while the manipulator feigns innocence, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. The cruelty of secret stakeholder deals is their invisibility. You don't see them being made, you feel them later, in the unease that no one can quite explain. They turn transparency into theater and cooperation into competition. And by the time you realize who's been trading in the dark, the decisions are already signed, sealed, and sold. Your trust, their profit. Seduce with emotion. To seduce with emotion is to manipulate through feeling rather than fact. To draw someone in, not with logic or truth, but with intensity. It's the art of overwhelming your defenses with warmth, passion, and vulnerability until your reason melts under the weight of connection. The manipulator doesn't just want your attention, they want your empathy, because once your heart is hooked, your mind will follow. It begins with emotional fireworks, instant chemistry, raw confessions, magnetic eye contact, deep conversations that feel like destiny. They mirror your values, echo your pain, and make you feel seen in ways no one else ever has. It's intoxicating, too good, too fast. You mistake the rush for trust, the bond for authenticity. But what feels like soul-deep understanding is often a performance. The manipulator studies what moves you, then plays it back with surgical precision. Emotion becomes their weapon of choice. They cry at just the right moment, share heartbreaks that make you drop your guard, or shower you with affection that feels almost sacred. You start making exceptions, bending boundaries, excusing red flags, because how could someone so sincere be dangerous? That's exactly how they win. Once you're attached, the warmth shifts. The highs turn to lows, affection to withdrawal, validation to punishment. You find yourself chasing the emotional intensity they once gave so freely. And that's the trap. The manipulator doesn't seduce for love. They seduce for control. Every tear, every touch, every "I feel the same way" is a key turning deeper into your psyche until you're no longer reacting to truth, but to the emotional script they wrote just for you. Dismiss doubts. Dismiss doubts are the manipulator's quietest weapon, used not to argue with you, but to erase you. When you voice uncertainty, they don't attack your logic. They attack the existence of your concern, your overthinking. You worry too much. You always do this. Each phrase is a tiny shove away from your intuition, teaching you that your discomfort is irrational, your instincts unreliable, and your questions inconvenient. This tactic thrives in the space between confidence and contempt. The manipulator doesn't need to refute your point. They just need to make you feel embarrassed for having one. Doubt, after all, is a warning signal. your mind's way of protecting you. But when someone you trust consistently dismisses it, that signal gets quieter until you start silencing it yourself. You stop asking questions, not because you're convinced, but because you're tired of being made to feel foolish for asking. Dismissed doubts often come wrapped in affection or authority, a smile, a sigh, a gentle laugh. Come on, you know me better than that. The manipulator reframes your concern as a character flaw, sensitivity, paranoia, lack of faith. Over time, you internalize their framing, apologizing for your intuition instead of honoring it. The cruelty of this tactic is its subtlety. You don't notice the erosion until it's complete. One day, you ignore that uneasy feeling, and that's the day it was meant to protect you. Because the manipulator's goal was never to calm your doubt. It was to make sure it stopped speaking altogether. Forced forgiveness. Forced forgiveness is the manipulator's quiet erasure of accountability, the demand that you absolve them, not because they've changed, but because they've decided the conversation is over. It's an emotional ambush disguised as peace. You need to let it go. I already said sorry. What more do you want? Holding grudges only hurts you. The words sound wise, even spiritual, but behind them is a desperate hunger to escape responsibility. This tactic twists your empathy against you. It reframes your pain as pettiness, your boundaries as bitterness. The manipulator paints themselves as the bigger person, calm, rational, healed, while you're made to look small for still bleeding. They weaponize guilt, convincing you that forgiveness is the proof of your goodness, that closure means silence, and when you comply, they win, not just your forgiveness, but your compliance, your voice, and your right to justice. What makes forced forgiveness so dangerous is its speed. It skips the process of change entirely. There's no reflection, no growth, no restitution, just a demand to move on before the truth can settle. You're told that dwelling is toxic, that peace means pretending nothing happened. In time, you start to question your own memory. Was it really that bad? Maybe I'm being too harsh. But forgiveness, when forced, isn't healing. It's submission. It's a silencing disguised as virtue. The manipulator doesn't seek redemption. They seek control over how the story ends. And by demanding your forgiveness, they're not asking to be freed. They're making sure you never hold them accountable again. Vague partnerships. Vague partnerships are manipulation wrapped in promise, the seductive illusion of collaboration that hides an imbalance of power. We'll build this together. You'll be part of something big. Let's join forces. The words sparkle with opportunity, but lack the structure that protects you. The manipulator keeps the boundaries blurred on purpose, because the moment roles, rights, or rewards are defined, their leverage begins to fade. They thrive on ambiguity. Details become flexible, timelines are still being worked out, and your contributions are praised, but never formalized. It feels collaborative at first, exciting even, because uncertainty is painted as possibility. But slowly, you begin to realize that you're giving more than you're getting, that decisions are being made without you, and that the partnership was never meant to be equal. It was meant to be useful. When you ask for clarity, they shift the tone. Don't complicate things. Why ruin the vibe with paperwork? I thought we trusted each other. Every request for definition becomes framed as distrust, and suddenly you're the difficult one. That's the brilliance of the tactic. It makes professionalism look cynical and naivety look noble. The danger of vague partnerships is how long they can last before you see the truth. You pour time, creativity, and faith into something that never truly existed. The manipulator keeps you chasing a shared vision while quietly building their own. And when the illusion finally breaks, you realize the partnership wasn't a bridge. It was a leash, and you help tighten it with every unspoken word. False comparisons. False comparisons are the manipulator's distortion of logic, a trick that twists perception by forcing you to measure yourself, your choices, or your situation against something that was never equal in the first place. It's the quiet poison in phrases like, at least I'm not as bad as them, or you should be grateful, it could be worse. These comparisons are designed to shrink your pain, to make you doubt your standards, to make injustice seem tolerable. This tactic thrives on contrast, not truth. The manipulator creates a distorted mirror, choosing examples that exaggerate their goodness or minimize your concerns. If you confront their betrayal, they'll say, "You think this is bad? Others have done worse." If you ask for fairness, they'll remind you of someone less fortunate, implying that your boundaries are selfish. It's emotional sleight of hand, redirecting focus until you forget what you were fighting for. False comparisons rewire your sense of worth. You begin accepting less because someone convinced you that less is still better than nothing. You start seeing compromise as gratitude, endurance as loyalty. The manipulator knows that once you start comparing instead of questioning, you'll lower your own bar to match their behavior. The cruelty of this tactic lies in its subtlety. It dresses itself as perspective, even wisdom. But it's not perspective, it's pacification. It makes you swallow discomfort with a smile and call it maturity. Over time, you stop demanding what's right because they've taught you that someone else has it worse and that your suffering somehow doesn't count. Jargon to confuse. Jargon to confuse is the manipulator's smokescreen, an intentional flood of complex terms, acronyms, and specialized language designed to make you feel unqualified to question them. They wrap deceit in sophistication, building walls of words that sound intelligent but say nothing. The moment you hesitate or ask for clarification, they smile condescendingly, implying that the issue isn't their vagueness, it's your ignorance. This tactic thrives on insecurity. People fear looking uninformed, especially in professional or high-stakes situations. The manipulator uses that fear to maintain dominance, overwhelming you with terminology that feels authoritative but is deliberately impenetrable. It's just standard protocol. You wouldn't understand the back-end variables. It's a common industry fluctuation. Each phrase pushes you further from clarity until confusion itself feels like proof of their superiority. What makes jargon so dangerous is how it dresses manipulation as mastery. You start mistaking complexity for competence. You assume anyone who speaks so confidently must know what they're talking about. That's when they slip in falsehoods, hidden costs, or unethical clauses, counting on you to nod along rather than risk looking foolish. When you're caught in this web, your silence becomes submission. The manipulator's language isn't meant to inform, it's meant to intimidate. Every oversized word, every technical explanation, every polished phrase serves one purpose: to make you forget that understanding is your right. Because once you stop asking what something means, you've already agreed to whatever it costs. Claimed unanimity. Claimed unanimity is the manipulator's invisible crowd, the illusion that everyone agrees with them, leaving you isolated, doubtful, and outnumbered. It's a psychological mirage built from phrases like, "We all think so," "Everyone's on board," or "You're the only one who feels that way." The goal isn't persuasion, it's pressure. When the manipulator invokes an imaginary consensus, they're not proving they're right, they're making you afraid to be wrong alone. This tactic exploits one of the deepest human instincts: belonging. We're wired to avoid rejection, to align with the group. Manipulators twist that need into a leash, manufacturing social proof to make compliance feel safe and dissent feel dangerous. They speak with confidence, using plural words, we, everyone, all of us, to create a phantom majority that never actually existed. Suddenly, your perspective feels small, unreasonable, even shameful. In workplaces, it sounds like the team already decided. In relationships, all my friends think you're overreacting. In public, no one else has a problem with it. The effect is the same. You start doubting your perception, your instincts, your right to question. The manipulator isolates you not by force, but by fabricating unity. Claimed unanimity kills truth through conformity. It's not the power of numbers that traps you. It's the belief that you stand alone. And the moment you stop speaking because everyone else already agrees, the manipulator doesn't need an army. They've already conquered you with a crowd that never existed. Spectacle distraction. Spectacle distraction is the art of manipulation through overwhelm, a dazzling show of noise, chaos, or emotion meant to draw your eyes away from what really matters. It's the dramatic meeting, the sudden crisis, the grand announcement that floods your senses while the truth quietly slips out the back door. The manipulator doesn't hide the lie. They bury it beneath spectacle, knowing that when people are dazzled or afraid, they stop asking the right questions. This tactic thrives on the human brain's limited attention. We can't look everywhere at once, so the manipulator makes sure you're looking exactly where they want. They create urgency, drama, or moral outrage to keep you fixated on the surface while decisions are made in the shadows. Look at how much we're doing for you, they'll boast, as something crucial. Your rights, your money, your trust is quietly taken away. In politics, workplaces, relationships, it all works the same. The manipulator sets off emotional fireworks to dominate the moment. They'll pick fights, stage tears, make grand gestures, or turn trivial issues into full-blown theater. Every second you spend reacting is a second you're not thinking. Every gasp, every distraction is power they reclaim. Spectacle distraction doesn't rely on deception. It relies on direction. It tells you what to look at, what to feel, what to fear, while the real story unfolds unseen. And by the time the lights go out and the noise fades, the damage is already done. The show ends, the applause dies, and you're left wondering when exactly the truth disappeared, right before your eyes. Pushed to tears. Pushed to tears is the manipulator's silent victory, the moment they've worn down your defenses so completely that your emotions spill out, not from weakness, but from exhaustion. It's not always yelling that breaks you. Often, it's the relentless cycle of blame, denial, and contradiction until your mind can't take the weight anymore. They want you crying, not for your pain, but for their power. Every tear confirms they've gained control over your emotional state. This tactic isn't about expression, it's about domination. They'll provoke you with cutting words, subtle jabs, or icy indifference, all while maintaining calm superiority. And when your voice trembles, when your composure shatters, they'll tilt their head and say, "See, you're overreacting." That's the cruelty. They create the chaos, then shame you for drowning in it. Your pain becomes their proof that you're unstable, dramatic, or unfit to be taken seriously. Over time, being pushed to tears becomes conditioning. You start anticipating the next attack, apologizing preemptively, suppressing emotion to avoid giving them satisfaction. But it never works. They always find another crack to press, because what they crave isn't understanding, it's submission. The most haunting part is what comes after. When you finally break, they may soften, offering comfort for the very pain they caused. They wipe the tears they drew out of you, whispering, "I didn't mean to make you cry." And just like that, the cycle resets. You confuse cruelty for passion, control for care, and soon you learn to cry quietly, because even your breaking point has become part of their design. Ignore conflicts of interest. Ignoring conflicts of interest is the manipulator's quiet betrayal, a deliberate act of pretending that divided loyalties don't exist. It happens when someone positions themselves as neutral while secretly benefiting from the outcome, when they claim fairness but have skin in the game. "I'm just trying to help. I have no personal stake." Yet every choice they steer, every piece of advice they offer, is tilted toward what serves them best. This tactic thrives in trust-heavy environments, workplaces, friendships, partnerships, where transparency should be sacred. The manipulator counts on your good faith, your assumption that people act in alignment with their words. They downplay or conceal their interests, because exposure would shatter their illusion of integrity. When they insist there's no conflict, it's rarely reassurance. It's a red flag waving behind a smile. The deception works because it feels polite to accept. Questioning someone's motives risks confrontation, so you silence the doubt, telling yourself you're being cynical. But that's the trap. Manipulators weaponize your decency. They make their benefit invisible by framing your awareness as distrust. And once you stop asking who profits, they've already won. Ignoring conflicts of interest isn't always loud or dramatic. It's subtle, bureaucratic, professional, even kind. But beneath the calm exterior lies quiet corruption. Decisions made in shadows, loyalties sold behind closed doors, truths shaped to fit agendas. When the manipulator says, "You can trust me, I'm unbiased," what they really mean is, "Trust me enough not to look too closely," because the moment you do, the fairness unravels and their mask goes with it. Promise silence. Promise silence is the manipulator's velvet oath, a pledge that sounds like protection but conceals control. You can tell me anything, I'll never repeat it. Your secret's safe with me. This stays between us. Those words feel sacred, soothing even, like an emotional sanctuary where vulnerability is safe. But when spoken by a manipulator, they're not about confidentiality, they're about possession. By promising silence, they invite confession. They want your truths, your fears, your guilt, the rawest parts of you that can later be twisted, exposed, or used. Every secret you share becomes a thread in their net, binding you tighter under the illusion of trust. They listen with empathy, nodding and understanding, until your words become currency they can spend when power runs low. The danger lies in how comforting it feels. They'll tell you others can't handle what you're saying, that they're the only one strong enough to hold your truth. It's intoxicating, the sense of being seen, accepted, safe. But the manipulator doesn't build safety. They collect leverage. And silence, once promised, becomes expectation. "I trusted you," they'll remind you, if you ever try to speak out. "You gave me your word." Promised silence is never about privacy. It's about isolation. It cuts you off from counsel, traps you in secrecy, and makes your own honesty feel dangerous. What once felt like intimacy turns into captivity. Because when a manipulator swears silence, what they're really saying is, "Your truth belongs to me now." Minor favor, big ask. The minor favor, big ask, is manipulation disguised as friendliness, a calculated sequence designed to make compliance feel like kindness. It starts small. "Can you help me with this one thing? Would you mind just checking this for me?" The favor seems harmless, even flattering. You feel trusted, needed, generous. But that's the seed. Once you say yes, the manipulator knows you're primed to say it again, even when the stakes quietly rise. This tactic exploits the consistency bias, our psychological need to stay true to our past behavior. After agreeing once, refusing later feels hypocritical or rude. The manipulator counts on this internal discomfort. They'll escalate requests gradually, each one framed as just a tiny step beyond the last. Before you realize it, you've crossed lines you never intended to, all in the name of being helpful. The shift is so subtle it feels like evolution, not exploitation. You start doing more, staying later, paying extra, keeping secrets, because saying no suddenly feels like betrayal. They'll remind you how generous you've been, how much they appreciate you, weaving guilt into gratitude until your boundaries dissolve completely. The genius of this manipulation is that it never feels forced. You think you're choosing freely, but each yes was conditioned by the one before. The minor favor was never about the favor. It was a test, a door cracked open just wide enough for the big ask to walk through. And by the time it does, it's too late. You're not just helping anymore. You're being used. Criticism framed as betrayal. Criticism framed as betrayal is one of the manipulator's most suffocating tactics, an emotional chokehold that turns honesty into disloyalty. It begins when every attempt to address a problem, set a boundary, or express disappointment is twisted into an accusation against your character. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? I can't believe you'd attack me like this. What should be a moment of dialogue becomes a crime of disobedience. This tactic weaponizes guilt. The manipulator ties your loyalty to their comfort, teaching you that disagreement equals betrayal. They paint themselves as the wounded party, transforming your valid concerns into proof of your ingratitude or coldness. Soon, you stop speaking up, not because you've stopped caring, but because you can't bear the emotional punishment that follows. Silence becomes the only way to preserve peace. The power of this manipulation lies in its inversion of morality. They make integrity look cruel and submission look kind. You begin to censor yourself, walking on eggshells to avoid being cast as the villain in their narrative. The manipulator thrives in that silence because unspoken truth is their favorite form of control. Over time, this emotional framing corrodes connection. You no longer share your thoughts or feelings. You perform agreement to avoid rejection. And when that happens, the relationship stops being mutual. It becomes obedience disguised as love. By making criticism feel like betrayal, the manipulator doesn't just protect their ego. They dismantle your right to have a voice at all. Financial shakedown. A financial shakedown is manipulation turned predatory. The calculated use of fear, guilt, or emotional leverage to extract money, favors, or resources from you under the illusion of necessity. It rarely starts with outright demand. It begins with sympathy, a story of struggle, a moment of crisis, a trembling voice saying, "I just need a little help." But beneath the plea lies design. The manipulator doesn't want support. They want control, and money is the chain they tighten around your conscience. This tactic thrives on your empathy. Good people want to help. Manipulators twist that instinct until generosity becomes obligation. They frame your refusal as cruelty. "I thought you cared. After everything I've done for you, you're really going to leave me like this?" Each line drips with accusation, turning compassion into guilt. You don't give because you trust them anymore. You give because you can't stand the weight of being painted heartless. The shakedown often escalates. Once you give, they return with new emergencies, new justifications, new emotional hooks. They might claim you're invested now or that you'd ruin everything by backing out. Every dollar deepens the trap, transforming help into dependence. Their dependence on your compliance and your dependence on the illusion that your sacrifice still means something. What makes financial shakedown so cruel is that they exploit the best parts of you, your kindness, your loyalty, your desire to do right, and twist them into tools for your own depletion. It's not theft in the open. It's a slow bleed disguised as love, loyalty, or friendship until the only thing left to give is yourself. Staged empathy. Staged empathy is the manipulator's most convincing mask, the flawless imitation of compassion used to disarm suspicion and harvest trust. It looks real, feels real, and often arrives exactly when you're most desperate to be understood. They lean in, eyes soft, voice gentle. They say all the right things. "I get it. That must have been so hard for you. I'd feel the same way." But behind the performance, there's nothing, no genuine concern, only calculation. The manipulator studies emotion like an actor memorizing lines. They mirror your tone, your pain, your pauses, building a reflection so perfect you mistake it for connection. It's not empathy they offer, it's access. Once you open up, they gather your vulnerabilities like data points. What hurts you, what motivates you, what makes you yield. And later, those same truths will reappear, but as weapons, not comfort. Staged empathy is effective because it feels earned. You don't see the manipulation, you feel relief. Finally, someone listens. Finally, someone cares. But that warmth is strategic. It lulls your guard, softens your judgment, and binds you emotionally to someone who is only pretending to feel. When you trust their empathy, you trust their intentions, and that's exactly the moment they strike. The cruelty of staged empathy is that it mimics healing while quietly hollowing you out. You confide, they record, you cry, they study, you bond, they calculate, and by the time you realize it wasn't connection, it was choreography. You've already handed them the map to your soul. Loyalty tests. Loyalty tests are emotional minefields disguised as devotion, carefully crafted scenarios designed to make you prove your allegiance through sacrifice. If you really care about me, you'll do this. I just need to know I can count on you. Don't you trust me? The manipulator isn't looking for reassurance. They're looking for control. Every test is a trap where your love, loyalty, or integrity will be weaponized against you. This tactic thrives on guilt and fear. The manipulator understands that good people crave belonging, that being loyal feels noble, so they twist that virtue into obligation, turning relationships into performance. They'll create impossible choices where protecting your boundaries looks like betrayal and compliance looks like love. Refuse and you're cold. Obey and you're owned. Each test escalates. It starts small, keeping a secret, taking their side, breaking a minor rule. But soon, the demands grow darker, isolating from others, lying on their behalf, sacrificing your own values. The more you comply, the more proof they demand. It's never enough because the goal isn't trust, it's submission. The cruelty of loyalty tests lies in their masquerade. They make you believe you're protecting the relationship, when in truth, you're erasing yourself to preserve their power. The manipulator doesn't want loyalty. They want surrender wrapped in affection. And the moment you finally fail one of their tests, they'll say the words that cut deepest. I knew you'd let me down. But the truth is, the test was never meant to be passed. It was meant to break you. Demand public defense. Demanding public defense is the manipulator's way of binding your loyalty in front of an audience, forcing you to prove devotion, not in private, but under the scrutiny of others. It's the moment they say, tell them I'd never do that. You've got my back, right? You need to make it clear whose side you're on. It sounds like a plea for support, but it's really a command for submission. The manipulator doesn't want truth. They want spectacle. This tactic thrives on pressure and fear. By demanding you defend them publicly, they place you in a double bind. If you comply, you betray your integrity. If you refuse, you become the traitor they warned others about. They use the crowd as a weapon, turning your hesitation into proof of disloyalty. The stage is rigged. The only way to stay safe is to protect them louder than your own conscience. In relationships, it looks like being forced to side with them during conflicts, to deny mistreatment or downplay harm. In workplaces, it's the superior who expects you to publicly validate their poor decisions. And in families, it's the parent or partner who equates questioning them with betrayal. Each time you defend them, you reinforce their power, showing everyone and yourself that your allegiance outweighs your truth. The cruelty lies in how isolating it becomes. You're trapped in their narrative, performing loyalty to avoid humiliation or punishment. Over time, your silence isn't enough. They want applause. They want your voice to drown out doubt. And by the time you realize it, you're not defending them anymore. You're defending the illusion they built to keep you captive in plain sight. Edited records, gaslighting. Edited records gaslighting is manipulation turned surgical, the deliberate rewriting of evidence to make you question your memory, your perception, and eventually your sanity. The manipulator alters texts, emails, documents, or even verbal histories, then presents the falsified version as proof that you're wrong. You must have misread it. That's not what I said. Check the messages. I never wrote that. And when you look, the record has changed. Clean, confident, and condemning. This tactic thrives on the authority of documentation. We trust what's written, archived, timestamped. So when those things betray us, it's destabilizing. The manipulator knows this. They quietly edit facts, delete a message, modify a report, change a few words, and then use the altered version to rewrite the story. The goal isn't just to hide the truth, it's to fracture your relationship with it. Once you start doubting your own recollection, they don't need to lie anymore. You'll do it for them. Edited records. Gaslighting is psychological warfare dressed in professionalism. It can happen in relationships, workplaces, or institutions, anywhere records hold power. When confronted, the manipulator acts wounded or incredulous, turning your search for truth into paranoia. Why would I change something like that? You're imagining things. Each denial deepens the fog until your certainty collapses. What makes this tactic especially cruel is its permanence. The paper trail, the very thing meant to protect truth, becomes the instrument of distortion, and once the false version is accepted as reality, you're no longer just defending what happened, you're defending your own mind. Praise secrecy. Praise secrecy is the manipulator's elegant seduction, the act of glorifying silence, so you mistake isolation for loyalty. It begins with admiration whispered in confidence. I love how discreet you are. You're not like those people who gossip. I can always count on you to keep things private. The words sound like respect, like trust. But beneath that flattery is a subtle command. Stay quiet. This tactic transforms secrecy into virtue. The manipulator knows that once you associate silence with integrity, you'll censor yourself willingly. You won't question their actions, you won't confide in others, and you won't seek help, because doing so would shatter the image they've built for you, the loyal, trustworthy confidant. They make you proud of your restraint while they exploit it. Over time, that praise becomes a leash. You begin to equate discretion with goodness, withholding truth not out of fear, but out of identity. The manipulator reinforces it gently. You're the only one I can trust with this. You're better than the rest. Each compliment tightens the bond, transforming manipulation into a moral duty. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its inversion of virtue. They don't silence you with threats. They silence you with pride. You feel noble for keeping their secrets, unaware that your integrity is being used to hide their deceit. Praise secrecy turns honesty into betrayal and silence into proof of loyalty. It's not trust they're building, it's containment, dressed in admiration, designed to keep you quiet while they move freely in the dark. Insider language. Insider language is the manipulator's velvet rope, the subtle construction of an us versus them world built on special words, shared jokes, and secret phrases that make you feel chosen. It begins innocently, a nickname, a coded expression, a phrase only you two understand. It feels intimate, exclusive, even sacred. But what it really does is create psychological territory, a space where the manipulator controls the meaning and you mistake belonging for safety. Language shapes perception, and manipulators know that whoever defines the words defines the world. By teaching you their terms, they teach you how to think. They just don't get it. People outside wouldn't understand. We have our own way. These phrases isolate you, making outsiders seem naive and the manipulators seem enlightened. Soon, you start speaking their language too, and without realizing it, you start thinking in it. Insider language builds loyalty by manufacturing intimacy. Each word shared feels like trust, but it's actually conditioning. It rewards conformity and punishes dissent. Questioning becomes betrayal, because to doubt the language is to doubt the bond itself. The manipulator uses this linguistic cage to reframe abuse as love, control as protection, obedience as unity. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its subtlety. It doesn't demand silence. It rewrites what words mean until silence seems like understanding. You don't notice the isolation creeping in because it's dressed as connection. But one day, you realize you no longer have your own words, and without your words, you no longer have your own truth. Fast-track approvals. Fast-track approvals are the manipulator's shortcut to control, a tactic built on urgency, charm, and the illusion of efficiency. They push decisions through before anyone can read the fine print, insisting that delay equals disaster. We just need a quick yes. It's a formality. Everyone else already agreed. These words are crafted to make you feel like the only obstacle between progress and success. But behind that speed lies something they don't want you to see. This strategy thrives on pressure disguised as momentum. The manipulator uses authority, confidence, or even flattery to blur your caution. They present the choice as simple, the consequences as minor, and the timeline as impossibly tight. You feel flattered to be trusted, relieved to be decisive, but what you're really doing is surrendering oversight. Speed becomes a weapon, hesitation a sin. In corporate settings, it's the rush signature on a deal full of traps. In relationships, it's the push for commitment before you've had time to think. The manipulator knows that scrutiny kills schemes, so they drown it in urgency. By the time you notice the cracks, your name, your word, or your reputation is already tied to their agenda. The brilliance of this trick is how good it feels in the moment. You think you're being bold, efficient, decisive, but you're not speeding toward opportunity. You're being herded toward obligation. Fast-track approvals aren't about saving time. They're about stealing yours before you realize it's gone. Fake moral imperative. The fake moral imperative is the manipulator's halo, a counterfeit righteousness used to pressure you into submission while making them look noble. It's when someone wraps their demand in the language of virtue, turning resistance into sin. It's the right thing to do. If you really cared, you'd understand. We all have to make sacrifices. Their words drip with moral gravity, but underneath the sanctimony is self-interest. They don't want justice. They want obedience, gilded in guilt. This tactic thrives because morality is sacred. Most people want to do what's right, to stand on the side of good. The manipulator weaponizes that instinct, positioning themselves as the moral authority while painting you as selfish or unethical for hesitating. It's not persuasion, it's moral blackmail. You're not asked to agree, you're dared to disagree, knowing it will make you look heartless or corrupt. They use tone, posture, and conviction like armor, speaking as though their cause is unquestionable. And when you start to waver, when you begin to explain your side, they interrupt with righteousness. This isn't about me, it's about what's right, but it always is about them. Their morality bends conveniently to their benefit, and the greater good they preach almost always centers around their own gain. The brilliance of the fake moral imperative is how it inverts integrity. The more ethical you are, the easier you are to manipulate. They don't need to threaten you. They just need to make you feel ashamed for saying no. And that's the cruelty of it. They steal not just your compliance, but your conscience too. Pressure to misreport. Pressure to misreport is the manipulator's corruption disguised as loyalty, the subtle or overt coercion to twist truth in service of their agenda. It begins with a nudge, not a command. Just make it look better. No need to mention that part. You know how this needs to read. At first, it sounds harmless, an adjustment, a simplification, a harmless omission. But behind that gentle tone is a demand. Betray the truth for me. This tactic thrives in workplaces, institutions, and relationships where reputation outweighs integrity. The manipulator frames deceit as teamwork, convincing you that bending facts is protecting the mission, the company, or the relationship. They'll appeal to your loyalty. We're on the same side. And your fear, you don't want to make trouble, do you? The result is moral inversion. Honesty becomes disloyalty, and deception becomes duty. Each compromise seems small, but every altered word chips away at your sense of self. You start to feel the tension between what's right and what's required, between who you are and who they want you to be. And when you hesitate, they tighten the screws, reminding you of favors owed, opportunities granted, consequences implied. Soon, you're rewriting reports, reshaping memories, or softening truths just to keep peace. Pressure to misreport is psychological blackmail wrapped in professionalism. It doesn't just demand silence, it demands complicity. And once you yield, they own your integrity, because after you lie once for them, they never have to threaten you again. You'll protect the secret yourself, terrified of exposing the moment you stop being honest. Withhold essentials threat. Withholding essentials is the manipulator's cruelest leverage, an unspoken threat to take away what you need to survive, not what you want. It's the subtle tightening of control through deprivation. Don't make me cut this off. I can't help you if you keep acting like this. You know I provide everything you need. It's not shouted, it's whispered with calm certainty, the quiet reminder that your stability depends on their permission. This tactic operates on primal fear. The manipulator identifies what sustains you, money, shelter, approval, affection, and turns it into currency for obedience. They create dependency, then ration it like oxygen. Each boundary you draw, each question you ask, comes with an invisible price. Risk losing what keeps you afloat. Over time, you stop resisting, not because you agree, but because the cost of defiance feels unbearable. It's a form of emotional starvation. The manipulator keeps you uncertain, rewarding compliance with small comforts and punishing autonomy with cold withdrawal. You learn to read their moods like weather, desperate to stay on the safe side of the storm. Your dignity erodes slowly, replaced by gratitude for scraps you should never have had to beg for. What makes this tactic devastating is its disguise. To outsiders, it looks like generosity, a provider, a protector, a partner doing their best. But behind closed doors, it's captivity by kindness, love laced with threat. The message is clear. What you need is mine to give or take. And once you believe that, they don't need to control you. You'll do it yourself, just to keep breathing.